the solos to be, quote, face-meltingly cool and go on for well over 10 minutes, Americans stressed that all guitar solos from now on should be equally as kick-ass as those in Van Halen's Hot for Teacher and AC/DC's Thunderstruck, or even better.
It should start out really slow, and then get faster and faster until they're all the way up at the top of the guitar neck and bending the notes like crazy, so it's like, and then there's all this awesome pyrotechnic stuff going off in the background. They should all be like that.
And in this week's local news, a report noted that on its surface, Glenbrook, Ohio is a small town like any other, a peaceful, all-American town. And yet, the report's authors added, if you only look closer, what you find may surprise you. In other news, a man is just having one of those decades where he doesn't feel like doing anything.
This is the Onion News Network.
You can stick it to the man and big tech. Join our FTL social mastodon at social.freetalklive.com. Free Talk Live.
It is Free Talk Live. Welcome to the program. You can join us. And as always, bring up anything you want. The number here is 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160. And a happy Independence Day Eve to you. Yes, that's right. It is not long before Independence Day, which will be tomorrow. Of course, most people don't actually call it Independence Day these days. They call it the 4th of July, and it's a bit of a pet peeve for some of us around here because we do really appreciate the ideas of independence. It's something we talk about a lot here on Free Talk Live. And so we want to remind people that that is the sort of the reason for the holiday. A lot of people are out there eating hot dogs, having barbecues, drinking beers, and not really understanding why. There's just some sort of patriotic mentality that's going into it, but do they actually recall that what we are talking about is a celebration of arguably the most successful secessionist movement in, hundreds of years? I mean, the United States has been a tremendous success as far as financial freedom is concerned. A lot of the people who moved here in that time frame of the 1700s, the 1800s, they did very, very well for themselves because they had the freedom to do that. There wasn't some big overarching federal or even state government in a lot of cases that was cramming regulations and taxes down people's throats. And so we had an unprecedented amount of financial success and financial freedom that resulted in that success that in the last 100 years has been slowly taken away bit by bit to the point where you now have a federal government that gets involved in absolutely every aspect of people's lives they possibly can. And if they haven't gotten involved in some aspect that you can think of, I'm sure they're planning on, something to invade that space of yours sooner rather than later. And that, of course, has resulted in secession talks happening all around the country. It's happening in Texas right now with the what they call the Texas Nationalist Movement. And I had a nice conversation with Daniel Miller. He was on we have a weekly secession activism call here in New Hampshire, and Daniel will pop in from time to time, and it's always fun to kind of pick his brain about what's going on down there. Right now, they are collecting petition signatures, and they are looking to get 150,000 petition signatures, 100,000 for the Republican primary ballot and 50,000 for the Democratic primary ballot, which in a state with apparently 14 million voters and 20 plus million people seems eminently doable. 100,000, I mean, it is a lot. There's no doubt about it, but by comparison, I think California is 600,000 to get something on the ballot there. So 100,000 by comparison is very, very limited. And I think that they can pull this off.
There's 2.4 million people in San Antonio.
Wow. So
I looked it up the other day. It went up. I always used to say 1.6 million because that was like the last number I had seen. And I looked it up just the other day to make sure, and it updated in 2020 to 2.4 million.
That
and that's
is
not
crazy.
Like the metropolitan area either. If you include Cibolo and New Braunfels and all that stuff, it was like 4 million.
Yeah, so I think doing 100,000, and again, 100,000 Republican, 50,000 Democrat is doable. So what it would do if they get the number of signatures, is it would get a question, basically a referendum. It's not binding, okay? So it would be a referendum. I don't have the exact language in front of me, but essentially it says something to the effect of, should Texas declare its status as an independent, or redeclare? Should Texas redeclare its status as an independent nation?
It would be great to just see how many people vote for that.
Right. That's basically the idea, is just to take the temperature of the Texas voters and have them weigh in on this. And we may have Mark joining us here. I don't know if he's got his equipment working correctly because we didn't have a chance to test it with him before the show. So he may just pop on in here randomly.
This referendum.
We'll see. Oh, there he is.
There he is.
He's popped in. Welcome, sir.
Referendum in Texas would definitely start a lot of conversations.
Absolutely, it would, because previously they've talked about these things. They've gone through a certain political process of having a state representative introduce legislation that, if the state house passed it, would then put something on the ballot. And Texas is kind of like New Hampshire in that it doesn't have your typical referendum process, meaning that or ballot measure process, where like when Mark and I were in Florida, they would just put all kinds of crazy things on the ballot. Like the smoking ban came in through the ballot. There was, I think, a bullet train that came in through the ballot.
Floridians voted in a smoking ban?
They sure did. Terrible. By a 70% margin, if I recall correctly.
Wow.
Yeah, it has to be at least 60% in order to pass.
Right, because it's a constitutional amendment, isn't it, down there, I think?
Yeah, it's a constitutional amendment. They decided how many square feet a pig could have agriculturally. I mean, the thing just goes on and on. Medical marijuana, I also believe, was brought in through the ballot measure. So, it's been this is the problem with populism. Yeah. Is if you give people an opinion on, hey, do you want a super fast choo-choo that runs from Orlando to Miami? And they're like, yeah.
And a bunch of people
what if you had to pay billions for it? And then they're like, no. And
yeah,
so
wasn't it
literally
years later?
4 years later.
Yeah.
It was 4 years later after they'd spent untold
10 billion
millions
or something, yeah,
on donuts and plans. They rescinded it.
Yeah. By the same margin, if I recall correctly. It was like 70% wanted the choo-choo, and then after a bunch of money got spent and nothing happened, then 70% decided they didn't want it. But anyway, in Texas, they don't have that process of getting a ballot measure. And I guess since they're constitutional amendments, Florida doesn't really either. But for whatever reason, it seems really easy to do it in Florida because it happens all the time. Whereas here, it doesn't happen as often. So I don't know about Texas doing constitutional amendments. But
I never registered to vote there.
Yeah, you can't just get one. You can't get a referendum, I don't think, on the general election ballot, but apparently you can on the primary ballot. So that's what they're working on trying to do there right now. And of course, that's going to result in a lot of media coverage. It's going to result in a lot of interviews for the folks down there in Texas, and obviously we're hoping to piggyback on that to some extent here in New Hampshire, where we can put forward yet another constitutional amendment proposal to get that on the ballot again here, which again, it has not gone on the ballot, but to try to get it on the ballot. And I guess that's one difference, is there's no amount of signatures that one can gather in New Hampshire to put something on the ballot. It has to go through the state representatives, which basically means it's not going to happen. But it at the very least would result in some discussion. It would result in some media coverage, and it would result in the people that didn't take us seriously the first time realizing that we're not just going to pack up and quit on this particular issue. So that's those are some of the things that are getting tossed around here as we again here on Independence Eve, as we're reminding people about what is independence and why is it important, and remind Americans that the holiday that you'll be celebrating, if you're celebrating tomorrow, is about secession. It's about the people here declaring their independence from the political system in under the king. And we did it before, and there's no reason why we can't do it again.
The Declaration of Independence, I think, is a superior document to the Constitution.
Yeah, it's a pretty good one. So if you want
It's
to
a
comment,
rhetorical document as opposed to a governing document. So it's kind of an easier thing. But I mean, it's easy to say, hey, you didn't do this and you didn't do this and you didn't do this, so we're out of here. But I think what's important about consider about the Constitution is that the people of the United States at the time would not vote it in without the 10th Amendment. And the 10th Amendment says the powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited to it by the states, are reserved to the states respectively or to the people, which is to say that everything that is not explicitly mentioned in the U.S. Constitution is not allowed for the U.S. government to be doing. They shouldn't be
Correct.
doing whatever it is that they're doing. So if it's not post roads, if it's not weights and measures, if it's not declaring war,
right?
That's the business of the states, not the business of the federal government. The problem, the flaw in the Constitution, is that it allows the federal government, which is to say the Supreme Court, to decide whether or not it has the business to do it.
Yeah.
So it turns out we've reviewed our actions and we've decided we've done nothing wrong, right? So everything's under either the Interstate Commerce Clause or the General Welfare Clause. Like, if it wasn't for these two things, the federal government wouldn't be presumably able to do the things that it has done heretofore. But the FBI, well, it's to promote the general welfare. What else?
Yeah, and it's, a lot of this big government stuff is, of course, one of the reasons why a lot of people are considering it being time to leave. In fact, a Northern California county is now having secession talks. We can talk about that coming up here.
My mom told me the other day, and I don't have a place to quote this from, but my mom is she loves to read about history, especially American history. She told me that some states, or at least one state, refused to join the United States of America unless they were given the opportunity to leave when they wanted to.
Which one was that?
I don't know.
I know Texas wrote something into their constitution.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like Texas.
But the fact is, this goes back to the 10th Amendment.
I don't think it was Texas because it wasn't one of the 13 colonies.
It was one of the 13?
Was not.
Was not. Well, Texas wasn't.
That's what I'm saying.
Right.
It wasn't.
You're saying it was one of the 13. Then.
Oh, one of the 13 colonies is
see.
the one that did that, and Texas is not one.
Got it. Well, New Hampshire, of course, has the 10th, not amendment, but the
right to revolution.
Yeah.
I forgot the
Article 10.
Article.
Article 10, which is the right to revolution, which essentially says that you have a right to throw off the shackles of an oppressive government, and not necessarily violently, but that you have the right to, start again, essentially. And it's very similar to the language, as I recall, that is in the Texas Constitution. But regardless,
doesn't it say the tree is thirsty?
I don't think so. But regardless of what the language exactly says in the state constitutions, the point is that per the 10th Amendment that Mark was talking about in the U.S. Constitution, the U.S. Constitution does not address leaving. And so what that means is it's up to the states to decide what it means to say goodbye. And so if a state wants to say goodbye, then they can just make that decision. There's no prohibition on that in the U.S. Constitution. It does not address any sort of process for leaving. And so some people say, well, that means that there is no process and you can't leave. But that they're wrong.
It has the process to amend the agreement. So the U.S. Constitution is this overstep in contract law that sort of occurred at the Second Continental Congress. And so, I mean, basically the Articles of Confederation, quote unquote, weren't working or whatever. And so they were going back for a second shot at it, and they passed the Constitution. And now remember, they had to, I'd have to look it up right here, but it looks like, I think it was Rhode Island, they threatened to blockade them if they wouldn't sign. So act of war in order to get people to sign, which says to me that the document isn't valid in the first place. But, it's I think that they could pretty easily go back and amend it through the Continental Congress situation, but they've tried to convene other Continental Congresses, and the states and the government have ignored it.
Well, I mean, the idea is you don't need to amend something because there's no discussion in the Constitution about how to end the relationship. So it's just not addressed, so therefore it's part of the states. Like it's pretty clear, it's pretty obvious, it's pretty logical that they joined, therefore they can leave on whatever terms that they want to, because there are no terms specified in the Constitution. And we've yet to see a peaceful attempt to actually do this. So it'll be interesting to see how this comes out, because at some point it's going to happen.
Little advice on any state that wants to secede: don't fire on a U.S. fort. Yeah. Little advice.
Yep. Yeah.
Allegedly.
Exactly. So according to the New York Times,
and think about this. Who knows who fired it? The thing. Think about this. Cuba has existed as an independent country for, depending on how you want to qualify it, at the very least 60 years. And there's been a U.S. base on the island of Cuba for that period of time.
Yeah.
Somehow they managed to continue to do business with a U.S. base there. Just because a U.S. base happens to be within the the confines of your state, whatever it might be, doesn't mean you got to fire on it.
Yep, exactly.
I don't even think the one that is up here gets used very much. What's it called? Post or
Pease Air Force Base?
Pease, yeah.
Oh, we saw some planes flying in when we were over at Bruce Fenton's house.
Was it were they government planes, or
it was like a big military cargo plane or something?
I'm just saying, I don't think it's like a bustling. I have never met someone in the military who's like, yeah, I just got stationed here from Pease in New
It's probably pretty
England.
small, but honestly, I don't really know anything about it. But these are things that can be negotiated later on, and ultimately, it's the fact is, when an idea has come, it cannot ultimately be stopped. So if there are enough people that actually value the ideas of independence, and right now there aren't, at least according to the polling that we've done. We did a new poll just about a month and a half ago that we actually really haven't discussed very much here. I don't think we really took the time to talk about it. But ultimately, the numbers in the new poll weren't as good as the numbers last year. Of course, last year was the first time ever there had ever been any polling done in New Hampshire on the question of independence. Like the questions we want to ask. Yeah, there have been some sort of regional polls that have asked people in New England and the Southeast and the West Coast, and they've asked people all across the country about secession. And it's been about a third on average of Americans who would support like regional secession, meaning that they would secede along with their neighboring states.
All of New England.
Yeah, and
all
then
the Midwest.
And they would have like their own federation. So those weren't exactly the questions that those of us who support independence for just one state, really wanted to ask. So we got to do that last year. And I do have the results. We might as well talk about it since it is Independence Eve, and then we can talk about California.
Somebody in your secession booster club brought up the other day the idea that even though these poll results are not as favorable for secession, it does feel more realistic. Like, it seems that if 60% of people were ready to leave tomorrow, that'd be something we would basically be able to feel in the temperature of the state's feelings for secession.
Yeah, well, it's clearly the people on my jury weren't secessionists, right?
Yep, 9 members of your peer that were total 12 blank slates too. They just were there for justice.
Yeah, we got a long way to go on this, and the numbers are down, and they're down by about half compared to what they were last year. The difference being this year, we actually had a different organization do the polling. So last year it was a group called Survey USA, which is purportedly reputable. I personally had never heard of them, but supposedly they're scientific.
Well, I also have another theory on why it would be so much different from Survey USA. Is maybe it's just that before the media got to have their outrage about the CACR 32, the constitutional amendment that got proposed in the State House of New Hampshire
last year.
In 2021, right? Oh, wait, 2022.
No, it was 2022, yeah.
Anyways, maybe before the media got their outrage articles out about it, maybe people just were like, huh, I guess so. And then, they got told what to think about it from the media, because the media was like, this is preposterous. It's so bad. We can't let this happen. So,
could be, but one of the questions that was asked this time that had not been asked before was actually specifically about awareness. And I think it was like, only half of people in New Hampshire, I don't have that answer in front of me right now, but I think it was about half of the people of New Hampshire had even heard anything at all about the secessionist question or the constitutional amendment the previous year. So there really wasn't a large amount of awareness, and there's more of a breakdown on that, which I can pull up here in a little bit. But
well, I think that probably, if people want to know the consequences of a given action, and if they found out the consequences weren't going to be exactly the way that they want them to go, I mean, like you guys are really into secession, and if it was 15, 20 years of a hard road to progress to where New Hampshire is going to have a greater, brighter vision after this sort of dip in commerce and trade and banking and all the stuff that could happen. Well, you're willing to do that in order to not be associated with the federal government and its wars and that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. I don't think a lot of people have that same thought process. You're like, hey, would you quit New Hampshire if you no longer could have a bank account? They'd be like, no. Or excuse me, would you quit the federal government if you could no longer have a bank account for the next 5 years?
Well, I mean, that's a silly question.
It's a big if, Mark, but I agree with you that if somebody has thought of that in their head, the average person's going to be like, whoa, that's crazy. But it's just also a big if. Like, I just don't think
most
there's
people
actually.
Aren't thinking about
I don't
their
want to
bank
make our listeners believe that there's some like high possibility of things like that happening.
The most common objections aren't about what about my bank account. It's what about Social Security. It's what about Medicare.
Sure.
It's what about the military.
In theory, Social Security should be given to you in the form of a check.
Correct.
Correct. Medicare and Medicaid would probably be distributed outside of the state, where you'd have to go through a border check in order to get there. That can be as long as 2 hours at the borders down in Mexico. And, you can probably get some of these things. I think that people want to increase their level of convenience, but I think if you talk to them about SWIFT numbers, which could very well be the case, remember the United States cut off the SWIFT numbers for Russia.
They did
during this recent war, and they're probably going to consider it an act of war in the case of New Hampshire.
That's
so
just another big if. I mean, why would they consider? What rational reason would they have for considering it an act of war? I know they don't act rationally, but it just seems like
it's not an act of war. I mean, international. I mean, there is such a thing as like international law.
Bonnie, do you think there's actually a war occurring in Ukraine right now?
Yeah.
I don't know. It's hard to tell.
Okay.
I don't know.
I don't know either.
If I had to guess,
that's the thing.
Galena, our caller, said there is. My mom went to Ukraine a few months before the war started, adopted a little boy, and the orphanage is now exploded.
Okay.
No kids were in it, but
interesting facts. I just don't know what's going on there.
You can't tell. You have to believe the media, and who's going to do that?
Is a fake war a war? Like I would say if it's all staged and they're really just have some other thing up their sleeve they want to accomplish. Like if the story is not really all the things we have been told, yeah, I totally believe that, but I do also think things are getting exploded.
There are definitely videos of alleged, bombings and such going on, at least
an FBI team that blows up a couple of things in New Hampshire and says, hey, it's these darn radicals. You get yourself a war.
So according to the study done by the University of New Hampshire this time, so definitely a much more well-known organization here in New Hampshire, only about 5% of people here heard a lot about the secession measure.
We have some good news. The indictments against Ross Ulbricht in the District of Maryland were dismissed with prejudice, meaning they can never be refiled. This is especially good because those indictments contain the only charge ever made that Ross engaged in murder for hire. This was a serious allegation that Ross Ulbricht denies. It was never prosecuted or ruled on by a jury, but was trumpeted by the federal government and the media as if it were proven fact. The Maryland court held these indictments for almost 5 years, poisoning Ross's case and leaving him under a cloud of unproven allegations. allegations. As explained in Ross's appeal to the Supreme Court, the fact that the judge used these allegations to give Ross a draconian sentence of double life without parole violated his Sixth Amendment right to a jury trial. Judges are required to issue sentences based on convictions decided by a jury, not unproven allegations never even charged at trial. Although this is a positive development, the dropped indictment will not set Ross free. Now, a presidential pardon is Ross's only hope of freedom. Sign the petition at freeross.org. freeross.org.
From Feature Story News in Washington, I'm Nick Harper. Authorities in France say that the riots that have been taking place across the country since last Tuesday appear to be reducing in number and intensity. 200 people were arrested on Sunday, down from a high of 1,300 2 days before. FSN's Ross Cullen reports from Paris.
Well, here in Paris, the mayor, Anne Hidalgo, led a counter-protest earlier on Monday, saying that she unreservedly condemns the violence that has been taking place for a week now. The president, Emmanuel Macron, met senior politicians on Monday and said there would continue to be a massive police presence in the bid to finally contain the rioting and the looting. If the violence continues on Monday, it would mark a 7th straight night of arson and vandalism, sparked by the fatal shooting of a 17-year-old boy by police last week. Ross Cullen, Paris.
Travel chaos is plaguing US airports ahead of the Independence Day holiday. Over 100 million Americans are under extreme weather warnings, and more than 1,000 flights have been delayed or cancelled as of Monday morning. FSN's US correspondent Kate Fisher reports.
It follows one of the busiest air travel weekends on record, with Sunday seeing the highest number of passengers ever screened at US airports. But severe storms are threatening a swathe of the eastern US, while the south and west continue to bake in a heatwave. 36 million Americans are on alert for dangerously high temperatures. Kate Fisher in Washington.
Investigators are continuing to search for multiple suspects following a mass shooting in the US city of Baltimore on Sunday. 2 people were killed and dozens injured, mostly teenagers, at an annual neighborhood street party. At least 9 people have been killed in an Israeli attack on a Palestinian refugee camp in the city of Jenin. Drones were deployed and gunfire was heard across the city in what Israeli forces have called a counter-terrorism effort. Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas, though, has called the incident a new war crime against our defenseless people. The US markets saw stocks rise narrowly on Monday, kicking off the second half of what's been a largely strong year on Wall Street. FSN's Benji Hire reports.
Monday's shortened session marked the start of a new trading month, a new quarter, a new half. Shares in Tesla jumped as the electric car company delivered a record number of vehicles last quarter, making up in part for another wild few days for Tesla and Twitter CEO Elon Musk, on the receiving end of backlash from users after he introduced limits on the number of posts people can read on the social media platform. The billionaire announced the temporary measure to address extreme levels of data scraping on the site. Also on the rise, shares of major banks, Wells Fargo and Goldman Sachs, both gaining after raising dividends.
Don't miss a moment of Free Talk Live. Get our archives daily via our podcast at feeds.freetalklive.com.
It's Free Talk Live. You can join the show and you can bring up whatever you want. The number here, if you want to do that, is 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160. We do have our website where you can interact with other Free Talk Live listeners via various features such as our social media platform, which you can go to social.freetalklive.com, interact with other show hosts, some of them, as well as listeners. And it is our server. It's running Mastodon, so it's more decentralized than those big tech mega corporate sites like Twitter or Facebook. So head over to social.freetalklive.com. You can get started over there, and you can learn more about the cool stuff happening here in New Hampshire. It's not just the independence movement. There's a lot of really great liberty activism going on here, and our friends over at Porcupine Real Estate are hosting a series of webinars that will help educate you on some of the really cool things happening here. All you have to do is go to move.freetalklive.com. That'll take you right over to the Porcupine Real Estate website where you can get registered for upcoming webinars. They are free to attend. And these are hosted by experts. These are hosted by people who are, I think almost all the Porcupine Real Estate staff are movers as part of the Free State Project. So they're people that know the lay of the land from a real estate perspective and also from the Liberty community perspective. They're going to be covering topics including gun freedom, medical freedom, and political freedom victories. They've, of course, going to be covering moving to the Free State, best practices for that, as well as how to find housing here. And, of course, Porcupine Real Estate also has their own YouTube channel where you can go and watch past webinars there so you can see what they've been like. But more importantly, you can sign up for the upcoming ones for free over at move.freetalklive.com. As we continue here, let's go to Ricky in the Commonwealth, Pennsylvania. Ricky.
Thank you there, Brother Ian, Brother Mark, Miss Bonnie, good evening.
Hello.
What's up, Ricky?
Well, we talk about secession, and that's something very important to me. Now, I have 4 points, and they all go together, and by the point number 4, you'll see my serious concern. Here's point number 1. 8 years ago, the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico was looking to join the Union. Now, the federal government said, sure, no problem. But here's the thing, only one hitch. You have to be a state. You can't be a Commonwealth. Now the people were divided 50-50, and their government made the decision, screw this, we're going to stay the way we are, which means a U.S. territory with one single non-voting member in the U.S. House, and that's it. Okay.
That's right. And every time it comes up again and again, yeah, that's right. So any territory tends to have a representative, but they're not allowed to vote.
Yeah, I knew the territories don't vote, but for some reason I thought he said that if they were a state, they wouldn't be able to vote. But I had never heard.
They're not part of the Union. This will make sense, Bonnie, so hang in there. Point number 2. Then you got the Civil War. Now, this is something a little different. Now, this is leaving the Union. Now, in 1861, South Carolina blew the U.S. Constitution away. The CSA formed quickly. Now, what they did was not only leave the Union, but they went one step further, which was the right choice. They said, this territory, this land, it belongs to us, not you anymore. What resulted? 600,000 deaths, the economy obliterated on both sides, and the infrastructure of the South destroyed. Let's move on to point number 3, why don't we? Now, it was a couple of months ago, Puerto Rico's back in the news again, but this is a little different. Now, once again, they're looking to join the Union. Now, here's how this one goes, and you can look this one up. See, this time they said, sure, but this time a bill went through the House of Representatives that gives them 3 choices. Okay, choice number 1, joining the Union. You can be a state. Okay, that's number 1. Point number 2. You can be something called a pre-association. That's also joining the Union. But you know what that's exactly like? The Commonwealth of Pennsylvania is a pre-association. But it's part of the Union, but in a different way than, say, like New Jersey. Here's point number 3, what they call independence. Independence is exactly what they are currently, a U.S. territory with a single non-voting representative in the House.
I don't know if I would call that independence.
I wouldn't either, but there's a point to this. Here's point number 4. Now, one of the things I'm looking at seriously and why I want that seat, because I know the power in the PA House when it comes to blowing the U.S. Constitution away. Now, we are a pre-association. Now, imagine this. Remember what I said about the Civil War? Now, I'm not going to be happy leaving the Union and saying we are still a territory. I'm going to want to say this land is ours.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what do you think? Now, if I say, okay, we'll leave the Union, but yet you can still have a territory as independence, maybe they'll be fine. Obviously, this went through the House's bill, right? But what if I say this land is ours? What do you think they're going to do?
Well, that is the big question. I mean, that is the...
I think it's going to end up like the Civil War because that's what made Lincoln crap his past. He, by force, stole the land at all costs and said he'd kill Everyone on both sides.
Yeah, but this
for
isn't the
Union.
1800s.
That's the thing. Yeah, like
It doesn't
we have
matter.
cell
You think they're
phones.
going to care?
Yeah, I think they are going to care. Go ahead, Bob.
100 years does matter.
But and you were going to say we have cell phones today. We have internet today. It's not like they can just roll in tanks somewhere and not have anyone and like crush an uprising without everyone on the planet knowing about it within 5 minutes. I mean, it is going to be something completely unheard of as far as in the last 150 years. I don't think they're
Americans
going to...
are not used to Americans getting killed in war.
No, that would be very uncomfortable. In fact, that is an important question that we asked, and thank you, Ricky, for the call tonight. It is one of the important
I have something
questions.
to say about something he said that he wouldn't let me comment on. I mean, you can continue. Sorry, but I was just
going to say that
making a
in the
point.
original survey that we did in Survey USA last year, which was done in 8 states. It wasn't just done in New Hampshire. It was done in, I think, Texas through Florida, basically the whole southern part. So Georgia, Alabama, etc. And then I think Hawaii also got the survey, if I recall. Maybe it was California. Anyway, it was like 8 states. And in every one of those states, they asked a question about what do you think should the federal government do for any state that peacefully secedes? Should the federal government use military force? Should the federal government use sanctions, economic sanctions? Or should it do absolutely nothing? And the majority of the respondents, I think it was just over 50%, said do nothing, somewhere in the 50% range, said do nothing. A smaller number, like 30-something percent, I think, said economic sanctions. And a very small number, an average of 6%. In some of the states, it was as low as 3%, if I recall correctly. But an average of, I think, 6% said, in all the 8 states, said military would be fine. Would go ahead, invade, use military
Still
force.
kind of
Less
scary
than,
high.
That's
I'm
1
not
out of
saying
20
it's
people.
bad, but
okay,
that's disgusting.
It's 1 out of 20
I'd like
people.
to talk
It's not
about
popular.
what was that name of that pipeline that got blown up at the very beginning of the Ukraine war? Do you remember that?
I don't remember what's called. Oh, Nord Stream.
The Nord Stream pipeline. Yeah, that's right. Thank you
It
very
wasn't
much,
at the
Bonnie.
beginning, though. That was actually in September of 2022. But Biden was talking about blowing it up before the Russians actually invaded Ukraine.
Yeah, so less than a year in.
There was a plot afoot for that.
Did the U.S. Ever claim credit for the Nord Stream pipipeline, or
No,
are
never.
they
It was
continuing?
Seymour
Is the
Hersh.
official stories? Is the official story still that Russia blew up its own extraordinarily valuable?
Is there
pipeline?
an official story, or are they just
I
like,
think
we
that's
don't
they
know
say.
what happened?
No, I think they are blaming Russia, but
The United
Seymour Hersh, I believe so. But Seymour Hersh, who is very renowned investigative journalist, he's in his 80s. He put out a multi-thousand-word report about like digging into what really happened with the Nord Stream pipeline, and he has sources within the federal government that obviously he's not going to name, who basically laid out the whole plot. And it was the CIA, it was the military, they, and I'm sure other agencies or whatever, they got together. This thing had been planned for quite some time. They said that they sent divers down in the summertime when there were, this was in the Baltic, that they sent these divers down during what were normal like UN military operations that happened during the summertime. So there was already
Commotion.
military boats and things like that that were around. So they used this as their cover to go down and plant essentially explosive charges on the pipelines. And they did not explode them until months later in September. And Seymour Hersh did a huge expose on this. It got near to zero coverage in the American media, but it's out there for anybody that wants to find it. He has
Is
his own...
Seymour Hersh murdered?
No, he's still alive. He's done a lot of like really revealing investigative journalism stories over the years. He's very, very well renowned. So the fact that he's putting this out there to me is like, okay, yeah, that's the story. I mean, this guy's really plausible and believable.
What I would bet would be that the federal government, and it seems like they've got the resources to do something like this, would just send in a crew of guys. I don't know where they're from, CIA, NSA, you pick. They're going to start blowing up some things that aren't particularly valuable in New Hampshire, but are going to make a big kaboom, right? And then they'll say, hey, look what these dangerous free staters, who they've been doing investigations on for 20 years now, right? And they've got, these files saying that they're a dangerous gang, they're armed criminals. They've got, they've got the people of New Hampshire convinced that you're dangerous enough to convict without any evidence at all of 6 crimes, I think it was. And they'll just say, hey, look, there is a war, ladies and gentlemen, going on in New Hampshire, and we need to quell it. So they'll fight themselves on both sides. It's not like they don't do this constantly. They're very good at it. They're practiced at it. I think that.
But what would they benefit from? I understand why they would do this in other countries where there is oil and stuff like that, but I just don't think that is worth them possibly losing a lot of people's respect. And it's not like, there's going to be.
Well, he's saying they would be hiding that it was them.
I know they'd be hiding that they started it, but then they'd go, "We got to kill a bunch of New Hampshireites," and a bunch of people would die.
They won't kill anybody. Look, there's not even that many people dying in Ukraine right now. It's just that every once in a while they blow something up, and it's got two. I presume it has 2 sides, but honestly, the casualties going on right now.
Americans don't care if Ukrainians die. Americans do not care. But if they hear one person accidentally got blown up in Nashua, they're going to care.
Well, now, Mark, are you saying, just to clarify, are you saying they're going to do this well in advance of any kind of referendum or any kind of
I think they're going
to
do it all, right? Like, they're not going to let if a referendum looks like it's going to go through, they've learned their lesson from Brexit. Right? Like, nobody did anything in Brexit, and it's not the kind of country that necessarily would. But if they're like, it's going to be close. It could be 40-60 our way, meaning the government's way, the U.S. government's way. They'll be like, nope. We gotta make sure that we got to do something here.
Well,
guys.
Right now, I think what they're already doing is they're already planting FBI agents here in
Nazis.
New Hampshire, and they're acting like they're
That's
Nazis.
What I immediately thought of too.
Right? There's this group that appeared 2 or 3 weeks ago in Concord.
Oh.
They have you seen these Patriot Front guys, Mark?
I've heard the term. What are they? The Christian nationalists?
I don't know.
I don't think they're Christian.
I don't know what they purport to believe, but they seem to be kind of like right-wing, maybe white nationalist types. But if you go and just look them up, you'll see that what they do is they show up at places, they wear masks.
All the same outfit.
They all have the same outfit on, like khaki pants and like a blue shirt or whatever.
Pretty outfit. Suspicious.
Right.
It looks very Fed-like. They never show their face. Very rarely will any of them actually be showing their face. They've exited. There's been video of them leaving events in various places around the country, and somebody with a camera who's not with them will like follow them, and they'll pile all into the back of a U-Haul truck and then take off and leave the scene.
They will literally do like Nazi salutes. Like, how obvious can they be that they're like not regular people?
Somebody else took a picture of FBI agents at raiding somebody's house or whatever, and the FBI uniform was literally the same uniform as what the Patriot Front people were wearing, except the FBI had the letters FBI on the back of the blue shirt. Otherwise, it was a blue shirt, khaki pants.
Wow.
Pretty much the exact same uniform. Anyway, there was something that happened here in New Hampshire. They looked like the Patriot Fronters. I'm not sure if that's what they were representing themselves as.
Oh, I didn't know they weren't.
But they showed up. I don't know if they were. They weren't. I didn't watch the video from the event, but they showed up at some restaurant where some liberals were hanging out or having some kind of meeting.
It was Teetotaler, or I think that's what it's called.
In
Concord, a tea or coffee tea cafe place.
Yeah.
And they were having a drag queen story hour.
Oh, okay.
So they showed up to intimidate the drag queens and
they were
also
doing,
children.
Nazi salutes.
Yeah, they were doing Nazi salutes over and over again and just standing outside the windows because it's lots of windows that you can see out. So they're standing, encircling the windows, terrifying children in the name of protecting the children.
But here's the thing: the racist groups here, or at least one of these Nazi groups, showed up in Manchester a couple of months ago at a Trump rally. And our guy, friend of the show, sometime co-host, Joa from Breaking the Flaw was there, along with Vermin Supreme and a couple of Vermin's buddies, and they started to, they got their cameras out and they went after these Nazi guys and started, peppering them with questions and following them around. And what they learned was these Nazis were handing out secessionist literature.
Yeah.
In Manchester, which again makes it seem like, oh, this is something the feds would do, right? Yep. Go around acting like they're Nazis and associate secession with Nazis.
That's I think that what you have to do is look at you asked why would they do these things, Bonnie? And the federal government doesn't operate on a profit motive. They operate in sort of in a world of credibility and a world of sort of power. And the reason that they would do these things is that losing a state from the United States is an incredible blow to the power of the United States. Remember, it's not like anything less than the world reserve currency is at play here. So losing New Hampshire.
Don't see it. No one even knows New Hampshire exists. I never thought about New Hampshire.
It will when they secede.
I don't think that it would even be news that went on for 2 weeks.
It would be news.
The entire world, I don't think they would be like, did you hear New Hampshire seceded? They know Texas, Florida, Hawaii, California. Like, people aren't wondering, or people wouldn't care if Nebraska seceded. I just don't think that it's as big a deal as what. I think that the feds will try to do things to make it hard for it to happen. I just don't think they're going to start a hot war with New Hampshireites.
That doesn't seem
likely. They're not. New Hampshireites aren't going to fight. I mean, I wouldn't fight the federal government over something like this.
Well,
it's not worth it.
You left.
What
I don't think they're going to threaten to
they will fight themselves. Like these Patriot Front guys, they'll fight themselves. They'll fight these. So well, now we got to beef these guys up, and then they've got a hot war on their hands with themselves. So now they have to, react. And here it goes. This is all before the vote takes place. And the vote will never take place as a result because the people of New Hampshire are like, I don't want anything to do with these Patriot Front guys. Looks like they're what I mean? This is how they control it. It's all about control.
I can see this all happening then, Mark. So like what I thought you were saying before was we're going to declare independence and then they're going to have someone on the inside start something so that way they can declare war, roll in tanks to New Hampshire. And I don't see that happening. But I can totally see feds fighting feds, create unrest, make people think that the people who are into secession are Nazis, and then the vote never happens. But that's why we just got to kind of keep talking about it, talking about why sane, peaceful people believe in secession, talking about why we want the borders to still be open when we secede. We don't want to keep out other people.
I think the best thing you can do personally is talk about it. There's no problem. A state should have the right, and there should never be violence used against that state and its people if they want to secede. However, I think that really what you want to do is use the power of secession without secession. You want to say, hey, look, we don't want the tax regime that the United States federal government has or whatever. We don't want the FBI operating within our borders. We don't want your drug laws. We don't want this. We don't want that. The nullification that's been done all over the country in the name of marijuana recently and has a great deal of legs. Now, I don't think you can get out of the IRS, and I doubt very seriously you can get out of the FBI. I mean, the law enforcement in New Hampshire and around the country has just way too much respect for the FBI. They're going to be like, God, I can't wait till I can be one of them.
In New Hampshire, we've already done a little bit by that bill. I don't remember the number anymore, but it passed where it made it to where the local law enforcement will not help the ATF, I think, if the ATF comes into the states.
Yeah, but they watered it down.
I know they watered it down, but it doesn't mean it didn't get passed.
Something did happen. Let's go to the phones here.
Hey,
Bad Slave.
Every step is a good thing.
Bad Slave is on the line here. Go ahead, in New Hampshire.
Hi, thanks for taking my call. I wanted to remind folks of the Boston Marathon with the two brothers that supposedly bombed the
the
event.
Tsarnaev brothers. Yep.
I forgot their names.
Right. Do you remember that same uniform was all over the Boston Marathon?
Oh,
I
was
think
it?
that was the first appearance of maybe that Patriot Front. Everybody
No, I have no
thought that
recollection
they
of that
would-
at all.
Yeah, me either. I forgot I was even.
They had these guys with the blue shirts
Mm-hmm.
and the khakis, and they also had these big backpacks.
Oh, I just remembered something from I don't know, 2 weeks ago. There was video, and I don't remember where it happened, but in some state, the Patriot Front guys had a clash with the guys that wear the yellow and the black, Proud Boys. There was like a clash between the Proud Boys who don't wear masks and are like identifiable, and then the Patriot Front guys who are all wearing masks. The Proud Boys came at the Patriot Fronters and were like yelling at them, and then the Proud Boys started ripping their masks off.
Yeah.
And there was some report that came later on that said that the Proud Boys may be facing charges for assaulting federal agents. Now, I don't know. I have not confirmed that was true. I don't remember
You
where that
should
came
not
from.
be able to get a charge like that if you didn't know they're federal agents because they were undercover. That's just not fair.
Yeah. Well, if it's true,
Yeah, they
it's
can
really
just charge
interesting.
people with whatever they want.
Yep.
All of this secrecy is nothing but a knife in the back of us all. They just playing these games. The guy with the in Minnesota with the breaking the windows of the.
Right, you're talking about during the protests after the Black Lives Matter, George Floyd, where there was an actual identified cop, his ex-girlfriend. I think, Matt, you even caught this happening. Matt's joining us here on the third mic here for a moment. Remember that guy that was smashing in like the AutoZone window?
Yes, and he was like a St. Paul cop or something, and his ex-girlfriend identified him
by his walk, by his gait.
Yeah, that's right.
Wow.
That's right.
As I recall.
And I want to jump in real quick because just listening here, Bad Slave, in the studio, I heard you talking about the guys at the Boston bombing with the khakis and they're actually black jackets. They're all dressed the same, and they all have big black backpacks on, right? Those are suspected to be people who belong to a group called Craft International.
Who's that?
Craft International is like a Blackwater. They're like they're mercs, basically, and they call themselves a security agency or whatever. Really, they're just mercs.
So what were they doing there?
Well, it's kind of questionable. There was so many of them crawling around, little creepy spy dudes, that belong to an elite group of people who know how to bomb stuff.
They ran around searching people's houses afterwards, so I bet it was just a big excuse to search a bunch of people's houses.
Yeah, that was really crazy, too.
For
Thank
whatever
you, Bad
reason,
Slave, for
we
the
may
call.
never know.
I appreciate it. We got more coming up here. If you want to join the show, the searching they were doing was shocking and outrageously unconstitutional. Just barging into anybody's house that they wanted to was crazy. More on the way. Hour number 2 is coming up. It's Free Talk Live.
You are supply, and lately there's lots of demand. I'm Holland Cook with Inflation Hacks. Before the pandemic, websites were offering to help you find a job. Back to the Future, the Help Wanted sign is everywhere. So this may be a good time to ask for a raise. The boss will be all ears if you've taken on extra duties while the shop is short-handed. Otherwise, test the waters. You will seem like quite the catch if you ask questions that demonstrate you've done your homework and if you seem eager to pitch in. And when it's time to talk turkey, let them bring it up and assume it's their opening bid. And this is when to ask about benefits, overtime, and other details. For instance, is there a place to park? How are you coping? Post your inflation hacks at andyoucanquoteme.com.
There are basically two types of advertising, direct response and branding. Radio's great for direct response with its low cost to listener ratio, but audio can't be beat for branding, which is a longer term endeavor. You want to be the first thing that someone thinks of when they think about your product or service. If you have a local business that you want kept top of mind in your community, call the station. If you need national reach, Free Talk Live's got around 200 radio stations, millions of monthly listening sessions, can suit all budgets, and if we don't think we're right for you, we'll tell you. Email me, mark@freetalklive.com.
What if you want to hear the latest episode of Free Talk Live, but all you have is your phone, you forgot to download our archive, and you have no data connection? You can call our Listen line at 641-793-0191. That's a long-distance number, so you may incur charges. If not, listen as long as you want. 641-793-0191. The Free Talk Live Listen line, 641-793-0191.
You're listening to the live edition of Free Talk Live. Hour number 2 is next after the news here on the Liberty Radio Network at LRN.FM.
From Feature Story News in Washington, I'm Nick Harper. Authorities in France say that the riots that have been taking place across the country since last Tuesday appear to be reducing in number and intensity. 200 people were arrested on Sunday, down from a high of 1,300 2 days before. FSN's Ross Cullen reports from Paris.
Well, here in Paris, the mayor, Anne Hidalgo, led a counter-protest earlier on Monday, saying that she unreservedly condemns the violence that has been taking place for a week now. The president, Emmanuel Macron, met senior politicians on Monday and said there would continue to be a massive police presence in the bid to finally contain the rioting and the looting. If the violence continues on Monday, it would mark a 7th straight night of arson and vandalism, sparked by the fatal shooting of a 17-year-old boy by police last week. Ross Cullen, Paris.
Travel chaos is plaguing US airports ahead of the Independence Day holiday. Over 100 million Americans are under extreme weather warnings, and more than 1,000 flights have been delayed or cancelled as of Monday morning. FSN's US correspondent Kate Fisher reports.
It follows one of the busiest air travel weekends on record, with Sunday seeing the highest number of passengers ever screened at US airports. But severe storms are threatening a swathe of the eastern US, while the south and west continue to bake in a heatwave. 36 million Americans are on alert for dangerously high temperatures. Kate Fisher in Washington.
Investigators are continuing to search for multiple suspects following a mass shooting in the US city of Baltimore on Sunday. 2 people were killed and dozens injured, mostly teenagers, at an annual neighborhood street party. At least 9 people have been killed in an Israeli attack on a Palestinian refugee camp in the city of Jenin. Drones were deployed and gunfire was heard across the city in what Israeli forces have called a counter-terrorism effort. Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas, though, has called the incident a new war crime against our defenseless people. The US markets saw stocks rise narrowly on Monday, kicking off the second half of what's been a largely strong year on Wall Street. FSN's Benji Hire reports.
Monday's shortened session marked the start of a new trading month, a new quarter, a new half. Shares in Tesla jumped as the electric car company delivered a record number of vehicles last quarter, making up in part for another wild few days for Tesla and Twitter CEO Elon Musk, on the receiving end of backlash from users after he introduced limits on the number of posts people can read on the social media platform. The billionaire announced the temporary measure to address extreme levels of data scraping on the site. Also on the rise, shares of major banks, Wells Fargo and Goldman Sachs, both gaining after raising dividends.
From Bureaus Worldwide, this is FSN.
With FSN Spotlight, I'm Simon Marks, with more today about the riots in France following the killing last week of a 17-year-old by police during a traffic stop. On Sunday, the grandmother of the dead teen urged people across the country to stop rioting. But the crisis has created a massive fresh challenge for French President Emmanuel Macron, just months after the country was brought to a standstill by separate protests over proposed changes to the pension age. Sophie Pedder is France correspondent for The Economist.
That was a completely different demographic. That was old people, organised protests that then became violent in the evenings with arson, torching of cars, torching of rubbish bins. It was troublemakers piggybacking on a very different sort of protest. This has started in the banlieue, the sort of high-rise housing estates that ring a lot of cities, and there is a real concern about policing. It's about the use of firearms by police when they are asking people to stop and when they're trying to enforce traffic law. Added to that is a sense that in a lot of these banlieues, where there's a very sort of big minority population, that the police is picking on young minority residents.
There are very long-standing grievances in many of those suburbs, rooted in France's colonial past and in discrimination that young immigrants say they've experienced in widespread areas of life. With FSN Spotlight, I'm Simon Marks.
And the main news again, authorities in France say that the riots that have been taking place since last Tuesday are starting to reduce in number and intensity. Travel chaos is plaguing US airports ahead of the Independence Day holiday. Investigators are continuing to search for suspects following the mass shooting in Baltimore over the weekend, and US markets rose narrowly on Monday, starting the second half of 2023. That's Feature Story News. Nick Harper reporting.
It's the Onion Radio News. Hager physicists have created quantum slacks. This is Doyle Redland reporting. The stunning announcement that a team of Hager physicists has successfully developed quantum slacks was made this morning at a press conference in Philadelphia. According to Dr. Daniel Chang, head of the Hager team, conventional notions about the physical properties and possibilities of slacks have been turned on their heads.
We are on the verge of unzipping the secrets of creation and peering into the pants of God himself. It appears the very fabric of the universe may well be a smart cotton twill weave.
However, Chang urged caution in further research after tests conducted last month at the Hager Pants Propulsion Collider Laboratory in Dallas suggested the possible existence of so-called anti-pants, which could, in theory, initiate a chain reaction resulting in no pants at all. Doyle Redland for the Onion Radio News, online at theonion.com.
This is the Onion News Network.
We're still not sure why you'd want to watch, but our video feed is streaming nightly for free at cam.freetalklive.com.
Free Talk Live. It is Free Talk Live, and we're kicking off the second hour here. Of course, the phones are open. If you want to join us, the number is 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160. Here tonight is Ian.
And it's Bonnie.
Mark is out there somewhere.
And it's Mark.
Oh.
There he is.
Here I am.
I think he's waiting for you to say, and outside of the studio.
I don't think I said in the studio.
You did, you
I?
did.
Oh, okay. Mark, where are you tonight?
Costa Rica.
Costa Rica. All right.
Pretty.
Very nice.
I got to see some monkeys today.
Oh my goodness.
A country that has no military, but yet they're not being invaded by China. What do you know?
Wow. Well, were they wild monkeys or like in a zoo?
Wild monkeys.
Wow, that's so cool.
Were you going to say something else about the military?
You know, I think that the difference between police and military is beginning to vanish over time, right? Costa Rica doesn't have a military, but they do have a police force.
Okay.
And most of the military used in, say, Guatemala is being used for situations where they don't have enough police to deploy in a given circumstance. So Guatemala knows it isn't going to get invaded, and that if it did get invaded by, say, Mexico, there's nothing it could do about it. So, you know, why have people die in the process? I think that most Central American countries, the difference between their military and their police is slim.
Okay, but if we were to look at a similarly sized nation to Costa Rica as far as population, and look at the number of police in Costa Rica, and then look at the similarly sized nation, whatever that would be, and the number of police there, and then add to that the number of military, would it be a larger number in the other nation than it is in Costa Rica?
I don't have an answer for you on that. I haven't done the research, but last I heard, Costa Rica had 6 million people in it, which is pretty darn small. It's like 4 times the size of New Hampshire.
Do they have, is it like Mexico where they've got the federal police riding around in pickup trucks with machine guns, or is it a little less in your face?
It's a little less in your face. Yeah, they just have, they just have cop cars.
Okay. Let's go to the phones here. We were talking about independence, and of course, Independence Day. We're here on Independence Eve. We got Chris on the line. He's listening to us on Odyssey, which is a video streaming platform you can access over at watch.freetalklive.com. Chris, welcome. You're on Free Talk Live. Go ahead.
Hey, what's up?
What's on your mind?
I wanted to talk about the Proud Boys and the leader Gavin McInnes. He's went on stream putting a butt plug up his ass.
Okay, you can't say that on broadcast radio, so we're just going to dump your call.
I'm pretty sure he's like bisexual, so who cares?
Okay, yeah,
He's
whether
married,
that happened or not, I don't know, but you can't say it on broadcast radio. And
I
I
don't
asked him
even know-
specifically not to be unradio friendly.
Well, he's a loser. So.
Yep. What were you going to say?
I don't even think that Gavin McInnes is still the leader. That's like old
Yeah,
news,
I think he was
isn't
like
it?
a founder of them or something, but may not be involved with them currently.
It's like,
I don't know.
I just hate these subjects with these stupid fake fed groups because it's like it brings up people like him who just want. I know so about that Gavin McInnes, Nazis. It's just like, oh my God, it's scraping the bottom of the barrel of like American politics discourse.
I think, Bonnie, you had said in the last hour you wanted to respond to something Ricky said. I made a note.
It's like, sorry,
and
it's
I wanted to
barely
come
even
back to it.
interesting now. It would have been something to say when he was talking about it, but he didn't let anyone comment. He has to get out a monologue before anyone else can comment.
Mm-hmm.
But it was just, I never knew that they were given the option, Puerto Rico was given the option to become a state or become a commonwealth. Like, I had heard about this ever since, well, a very
No, I don't
long
know if
time.
it was become a state or become a
No, he
commonwealth.
said that. No, become a state,
The way that
commonwealth,
it was-
or none. I just never heard that was one of the options.
Ricky's got an axe, right? And that axe is called a commonwealth.
Yeah.
And you can't really listen to what he says through a lens of sanity and come out with what you're expecting. So it is true that not too long ago, Puerto Rico had a vote as to how they wanted to relate to the United States, and
they've
one of
had
the
it-
options was being a
They've
state.
had many
Multiple
votes.
times in my
Yeah.
life, yeah.
Right. And it's going to keep coming out the way that it comes out. What's right about being a territory is a whole bunch of aid. Lots of money for your politicians and new government buildings and roads and all that stuff. Just money flows in all over the place. And you don't have any of the rules that come with being a state. So Puerto Rico can put whatever discounts it wants on the federal government's income tax. If I got to put together a territory, I'd make it a U.S. territory. If I was going to put together any kind of nation or whatever, I'd make it a U.S. territory because the benefits are worth it. Puerto Rico specifically suffers from the Jones Act, and the Jones Act should be repealed.
Can you
And
explain
that's
what
it.
that does?
I wish I could. The Jones Act effectively makes it so that Puerto Rico can only receive shipping, like shipping from the U.S. Everything that goes
I
there
know
must
why.
pass.
It's really stupid. It's because a ship cannot leave a United States bay and drive to another United States bay. It has to.
Okay, it's I believe it's an international ship that cannot do this. It has
Okay,
to
so
be
an American one could?
U.S. flag flying, registered in the U.S. ship.
And they don't do that much because.
There just aren't as many. It was actually the Jones Act that put a bunch of U.S. ships out of business. There's an interesting John Stossel report about the Jones Act and
Yeah,
how
we watched-
ridiculous and counterproductive it has been. But ultimately, it hurts these islands especially. It also hurts people in the United States as well, because if you want to get some, you want to get oil or whatever it was. I think somebody gave this example, actually. It was a hurricane. It affected Puerto Rico directly in this particular case. Puerto Rico got slammed by a hurricane. Their gas companies were, demolished in a lot of ways, and they needed gas immediately. And there was like an oil tanker or whatever, or a gas tanker or whatever it was, off the coast of Puerto Rico that could have helped.
Well, didn't Trump allow it? I thought that he
I don't
allowed
know.
it, but he didn't repeal the Jones Act. It's like,
Could be.
I can see why this is a crappy idea right now, but I'm just not gonna actually
Well, my
fix
understanding
it.
is whether he allowed it or not, they could not help immediately.
Yeah.
Because of the Jones Act, because the tanker was not registered to the United States, and so therefore it couldn't do anything to help out the people of Puerto Rico legally. And where you actually had spent some time, Mark, in Saipan over in the U.S. Marianas, my understanding is the Saipan or the Marianas actually has an exemption from the Jones Act, meaning that Go ahead.
Saipan is interesting because it wasn't a spoil of war like Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands and Cuba and Philippines and all these other things that the U.S. got from the Spanish-American War. Saipan wrote a contract up, and the U.S. and actually U.S. wrote it up. Anyway, Saipan signed a contract with the U.S., and they don't have to do several of the things that the other territories have to do because they negotiated themselves into a territory. And that's why I say it's superior to be a territory. The Jones Act needs to go away.
Isn't Puerto Rico a territory?
Puerto Rico's a territory, but it's under the Jones Act because it's a spoil of war.
Right.
And in fact, all the complaining that goes on from Puerto Rico is really kind of silly. What it should be doing is pushing against the Jones Act instead of pushing against being for a state or being against a state or being independent or any of these things.
I thought
the number one thing that would.
My impression was that most Puerto Ricans don't want to be a state. Like when I was,
they voted to apparently join, according to Wikipedia.
They have officially joined? There's going to be 51 states?
They would have to be allowed to join. This is a referendum. It was held November 3rd, 2020 at their general election. It was the 6th referendum, according to Wikipedia, on the status of Puerto Rico. The previous one was 2017. It was the first referendum with a simple yes or no question, with voters having the option of voting for or against becoming a U.S. state. And the referendum was non-binding, as the power to grant statehood lies with U.S. Congress. But in this case, it was just over 52% that voted yes to be admitted into the Union as a state.
Wow.
Which would be a perfect time for New Hampshire to leave, because then we could just keep 50 stars. They can have their 50-star flag, so maybe we could do a little swap.
Wow. In 2009, there was a vote, if not 2010, but I was in 7th grade, and I had some Puerto Rican friends, and I was like, oh, did you hear that Puerto Rico might become a state? And they were like, my parents really do not want that to happen. My family does not want that to happen. I was like, what? Just because at the time I was like, why wouldn't you want to join America, the best country ever?
Right. And it makes perfectly good sense until you realize that being a state is a raw deal compared to being a territory.
Right, especially if you can get Jones Act exemption, because in Saipan, what effectively that means for them is they can get products from anywhere in the world. Anywhere who's willing to ship to Saipan, there's no restriction, and that, I imagine, keeps the cost of living on an island in the middle of BF nowhere down as low as possible. It's always more expensive to live out on an island, right? But if you can at least get shipments from anywhere in the world, you've got open market competition, at least in that area, so that's a good thing.
Yeah, what I found on Saipan is that some things were a little cheaper. For instance, some fruits were less expensive. Some things were way more expensive, and some things were just sort of ordinary U.S. and most things were just sort of ordinary U.S. prices. Like getting a gallon of milk could be $10. But I mean,
that's what we're paying for raw milk here right now.
No, it's like $7.
Drink
that's a half
milk.
Wait, what? You're against raw milk?
No, I'm against. I just don't drink milk.
Why? I can't tell if we lost.
Dropped out.
Oh shoot!
What did you say, Mark?
I just don't drink milk.
Oh, okay.
I mean,
it's not your thing.
I'm not against it. I don't hate it. I just don't sit down with a glass of milk and do it. If somebody gave me a big old peanut butter
cookie or something, we're missing parts of what he's saying.
Some packets dropping here.
Yes,
hold that thought there, Mark. It's not working out right now. Just hold that thought.
Consume.
Yeah, we'll come back to you here in just a moment.
Peanut butter cookie. Yeah, I have to drink milk every day because I drink coffee every single day, and I have never even tried black coffee, I don't think, and I don't want to.
So we were in the first hour of the show talking about independence. It is Independence Eve, and I was beginning to describe the new survey, the new poll that had been done here in New Hampshire this year. We did one last year. When I say we, it was the Foundation of New Hampshire Independence, of which I'm not officially a part, but I certainly support them. They had a very generous donor give a lot of money to them to hire a polling firm, which is called Survey USA, to do a poll in 8 different states. Now, this poll at Survey USA was very detailed. It was, I believe, 27 questions, so pretty lengthy. All of them were related to like how people feel about the federal government, and turns out the majority of people in New Hampshire are not a big fan of the federal government, but that doesn't mean they're ready to leave it.
We can just change it.
Yeah, I don't know if that's what they actually believe, but there's a lot of really interesting questions, and I did blog about it last summer over at nhexit.us, so if you want to dig into the Survey USA poll, you can certainly do that. The thing that we did differently this year, NHExit.us actually hired the survey or the polling firm. In this case, it was University of New Hampshire's Survey Center. Now, this is an organization that is well respected here in New Hampshire as far as polling is concerned. They do a poll every month. They call it the Granite State Poll. And usually they're asking roughly 900 to 1,000 people in New Hampshire different political related questions. So, you know, in a political year like this one, or presidential primaries are going on, they're asking questions about the primary. They ask some questions about marijuana legalization. So they just pick different issues that are kind of hot at the moment, and they'll ask those questions. Well, as it turns out, you can also pay them, a few $1,000s, and they'll go ahead and ask your questions too, as long as they agree. They're not going to just take your questions the way you necessarily want them to ask them. They will give you their input on how the questions should be asked. Yeah, they'll kind of construct the questions on the way they think it would be the most, scientific or fair to ask the question. So we did have some changes to some of the questions. We only hired them to do 4 questions.
But not in like a biased bad way or anything,
I don't feel
right?
like it was biased, no.
You're saying?
No, they thought it was an improvement on the question. So we took some of the questions we took 3 questions from the previous survey, what I considered to be the most relevant questions from the previous survey, and we essentially re-asked those, although they were somewhatly worded differently. And then there was a new question about awareness of the previous year's constitutional amendment process that was potentially going to ask the people of New Hampshire on a ballot whether or not they wanted to secede peacefully from the United States. And as it turns out, the majority of people in New Hampshire, or actually about half, 50% of people in New Hampshire had heard absolutely nothing about the proposed constitutional amendment. 21% said they'd heard not very much. 23% said some, and 5% said a lot. So half had heard something, although 21% not much. And then of the remainder, 28% heard either a lot or some about it. And so there wasn't a whole lot of penetration into the news media about that particular issue last year. And so it's not surprising.
There was. It's just there wasn't a lot of people. It's not like 100% of people will read the news. I think
that's true, but there really
is.
Wasn't that much coverage. I mean, we really didn't get a whole lot of news about it because I don't think it was taken seriously. It was kind of looked at as a kooky thing.
Well, the thing is, I don't think that there was a lot of write-ups, just everything about the CACR 32 bill, but there was lots of references to it attacking Matt Santonastasso and attacking.
Oh yeah, the political
Mike Sylvia,
people were aware of it. So in fact,
but it was in articles that the average people could read. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, some of it was. I mean, it wasn't by no means was it a focus or anything like that. It really wasn't taken very seriously. But when you actually broke it down, you broke down the question of who had heard of.
And that wasn't me saying that it was taken seriously.
Sure, it just didn't get a lot of coverage. That's all. It was the political types that were more well aware of it. In fact, the liberals were a little bit more on the ball when it came to this particular thing.
Wasn't there a whole episode about it in the NBC documentary?
Absolutely, yeah. That was one of the benefits. No, that came out this year.
Yeah, before this poll was taken.
Oh, yeah, that's true. No doubt about that. But this poll was asking people about whether they were aware of it last year. So there turns out that there were people in the North Country were far more likely to have been aware of it.
The question asked, were you aware of this in 2021?
No, it would be 2022. In March of 2022, the New Hampshire House of Representatives rejected a proposed constitutional amendment calling for New Hampshire to peaceably declare independence from the United States and to govern itself as a separate country. How much do you recall hearing about this?
Okay, but that could mean how much do you recall ever hearing about this?
It could. Either way, it wasn't very many. So that was the one new question. The sort of retreads that we went through again, because you want to see, are you growing in popularity and awareness on an issue or not? And of course, it's good to take different. I thought it was a good idea to bring a different polling firm in here and just see what kind of results they got compared to the other one. And again, Granite State Poll is pretty well respected here inside New Hampshire. Unfortunately, I don't think any mainstream media picked up this story. I was hoping that having UNH, the University of New Hampshire, actually conduct the survey would result in some mainstream media picking up the news, and I didn't hear anything. So I don't think we got any media out of this, which is basically what happened last year.
That's not really as exciting news. I mean, like, it's exciting to me, but I can't really
if
see
it was
that
1 out of 3, it might be more likely to get it, or if it was 1 out of 2, it might be more likely. But either way, they're kind of trying to ignore this issue, and that's why we need to keep pushing it as much as we possibly can. So
earlier I had said that one state didn't want to join the union. It was actually
the original
3.
The original 13.
Yeah, it was actually 3. My mom is the one that had told me this. I asked her if she can recall. It's a Thomas Woods book, Tom Woods.
Wasn't Rhode Island one of them?
Yes, and that's the one when I started Googling, I thought it might be Rhode Island, but the internet doesn't just straight up come out and say it. Tom Woods has all kinds of really interesting sources to learn about history that you can't easily get to because he went to Harvard. And so he wrote this book called The Politically Incorrect Guide to American History, and my mom has it all highlighted and marked up. And yeah, it was Virginia, New York, and Rhode Island originally wouldn't sign unless they had they were assured that they would be able to get out.
It's good to know. I was not aware of that. So the UNH survey that happened this year had 1,105 respondents, which was 76% more than the Survey USA sample. So we had a much larger sample size, which is always a good thing for a scientific survey. But again, the results were down across the board. The most positive result this time out was that 28% in New Hampshire who said they would definitely not or probably not want New Hampshire to join the Union if we already weren't part of the United States, which is a really kind of an interesting question to ask. It puts people into the position of trying to imagine a world in which we weren't part of the Union, right? To use their imagination on what that might be like.
Yep.
And then knowing what you know about the federal government and how it behaves now, would you want to join them?
Yep. Very unique, interesting to see how people respond to that as opposed to would you want to leave? Because it's like, it puts them in a totally different state of mind. They're less like defensive, like what if we get in a war or whatever, because there wouldn't be a war if you chose not to. I mean, I don't think
there's no
going to be a war
to
either
join,
way.
right?
Yeah.
57% said definitely or probably. So still a majority of people in New Hampshire would be willing to join the United States today. By no means good, but not an overwhelming majority. About 15% said they didn't know or they weren't sure. And again, 28% saying that definitely or probably not. They would not want to join the United States. And let's see, what else do you need to know?
Ladies and gentlemen, members of America, do you want to be partially responsible for torture of prisoners in other countries? Or do you not? Do you not want to have that partial responsibility from,
Plenty of Americans, the answer to that is yes.
That they do want to be responsible for torture?
Yeah,
they don't mind it at all.
Yeah, I know that's definitely the case. There are lots of psychopathic, or at least secondarily psychopathic freaks out there that think it's fine to kill as long as it's for America, for my family,
Last year, the language was a little more explicit on this question. Another question. So asking people if they're ready to peacefully secede from the United States. It didn't go as well this year, and the question did change significantly from last year. So last year's was, I would prefer New Hampshire to govern itself as an independent country, which last year found 29% strongly or somewhat agreeing. This year's question was more explicit, saying, quote, would you support or oppose New Hampshire peacefully seceding from the United States and governing itself as a separate country, to which only 16% strongly or somewhat supported. So about 1 out of 6 people in New Hampshire supporting what is a pretty strong statement, right? That we should secede peacefully from the U.S. and govern ourselves as a separate country. And we're going to continue here in moments. The number, but again, that's about half of last year's question, which wasn't quite the same question, but similar. More coming up here. You can share your thoughts on independence on Free Talk Live.
Uncovering the secrets and exposing the lies. That's what the readers of freedomsphoenix.com get every day. freedomsphoenix.com, constantly providing the information, the real news about government policies, and the real relationship we all have with the coercive government. The real condition of the economy, innovations in technology, breakthroughs in energy, health, and computer science. Learn the truth well before it's admitted to in the lamestream media. The corporate media, nothing more than distributors of government propaganda, but now there's an alternative. freedomsphoenix.com. Constant news updates on the issues that affect your life in the most important ways. With liberty and property under constant attack, freedomsphoenix.com provides the understanding behind the propaganda, and it encourages the participation of its readers. Go to freedomsphoenix.com. That's freedoms with an S, phoenix.com. freedomsphoenix.com. The revolution between the ears has already happened.
From Feature Story News in Washington, I'm Nick Harper. Authorities in France say that the riots that have been taking place across the country since last Tuesday appear to be reducing in number and intensity. 200 people were arrested on Sunday, down from a high of 1,300 2 days before. FSN's Ross Cullen reports from Paris.
Well, here in Paris, the mayor, Anne Hidalgo, led a counter-protest earlier on Monday, saying that she unreservedly condemns the violence that has been taking place for a week now. The president, Emmanuel Macron, met senior politicians on Monday and said there would continue to be a massive police presence in the bid to finally contain the rioting and the looting. If the violence continues on Monday, it would mark a 7th straight night of arson and vandalism, sparked by the fatal shooting of a 17-year-old boy by police last week. Ross Cullen, Paris.
Travel chaos is plaguing US airports ahead of the Independence Day holiday. Over 100 million Americans are under extreme weather warnings, and more than 1,000 flights have been delayed or cancelled as of Monday morning. FSN's US correspondent Kate Fisher reports.
It follows one of the busiest air travel weekends on record, with Sunday seeing the highest number of passengers ever screened at US airports. But severe storms are threatening a swathe of the eastern US, while the south and west continue to bake in a heatwave. 36 million Americans are on alert for dangerously high temperatures. Kate Fisher in Washington.
Investigators are continuing to search for multiple suspects following a mass shooting in the US city of Baltimore on Sunday. 2 people were killed and dozens injured, mostly teenagers, at an annual neighborhood street party. At least 9 people have been killed in an Israeli attack on a Palestinian refugee camp in the city of Jenin. Drones were deployed and gunfire was heard across the city in what Israeli forces have called a counter-terrorism effort. Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas, though, has called the incident a new war crime against our defenseless people. The US markets saw stocks rise narrowly on Monday, kicking off the second half of what's been a largely strong year on Wall Street. FSN's Benji Hire reports.
Monday's shortened session marked the start of a new trading month, a new quarter, a new half. Shares in Tesla jumped as the electric car company delivered a record number of vehicles last quarter, making up in part for another wild few days for Tesla and Twitter CEO Elon Musk, on the receiving end of backlash from users after he introduced limits on the number of posts people can read on the social media platform. The billionaire announced the temporary measure to address extreme levels of data scraping on the site. Also on the rise, shares of major banks, Wells Fargo and Goldman Sachs, both gaining after raising dividends.
You can help spread the ideas of liberty with our Patreon for just $5 per month at amps.freetalklive.com.
Talk Live. Phones open if you want to join the show. You can. The number is 603-283-6160. We're talking a little bit about independence here tonight. It being Independence Eve. Also discussing the idea, we had somebody call in about Puerto Rico, and that led to a discussion about sort of alternative statuses underneath the United States government, such as territory, which has a bit of a range as far as places that were dominated and taken over by force by the United States.
What do you mean by range?
So there's, like Mark was saying, there's the sort of the range of you've been dominated and taken over by force versus you joined through a negotiated agreement, like the islands out where Saipan is, which is the capital of the Marianas Islands, that had an agreement to join the United States as a territory, and they got a better deal than Puerto Rico did. So we can talk about those things. And again, it is Independence Eve. Ian, Bonnie, and Mark here with you tonight. We're going to go to your phone calls and thoughts. But I also want to let you know that Free Talk Live was brought to you this hour by Dash. And Dash is digital cash. It's a cryptocurrency designed to be used for spending. Last year, Dash launched a killer app that allows you to spend your Dash at over 150,000 locations across the United States. We're talking about major retailers, big brands that you are familiar with, stores you probably already go to. The difference here is you actually get a discount for paying in Dash. So you finally have a reason to actually spend your cryptocurrency. The app is called Dash Direct, and it is available on your Apple or Android App Store. And from what I understand, it works very, very well. I'm not allowed to use cryptocurrency under my bail condition, so I've sadly never been able to try Dash Direct. But our co-host, Captain Kickass, uses it all the time. And he was a big user of Dash Direct prior to Dash becoming a sponsor. So, like, he's the real deal. Like, he was using this because it was useful, not because they're a sponsor of the show, right? Like, he was using Dash Direct because you get a discount to spend Dash, which is a great reason to choose spending crypto instead of spending dollars. So they've really done the right thing with giving people an incentive to spend their Dash. And each business, by the way, has different discount levels. So they range from less than 1% to 4 to 6% to some of them as high as 7 to 9%. Just depends on the business and the discount they want to offer. Dash is one of the oldest cryptocurrencies, and it's widely available on exchanges and in multi-crypto wallets. It's easy to get. It's easy to use Dash. You can start by learning more at dash.org. And thanks to the Dash DAO for sending us 32 Dash per month to promote Dash on the air. You can visit dash.org to learn about Dash. That is dash.org. Let's go to the phones here. Mark is listening on the radio to WGOW in Chattanooga. Go ahead, Mark. Mark in Georgia, are you with us?
Oh, that's Tennessee.
He's listening in Georgia. They've got a pretty big signal, so it's pretty easy for people in like North Georgia to hear the Chattanooga station. Anyway, Mark, not sure what happened to you there. We'll put you back on hold and maybe try you back in a little bit. Meanwhile, we tried Johnny in New York. Johnny, you're on Free Talk Live, watching us on Odyssey at watch.freetalklive.com.
Hello, can you hear me?
You're on the air, Johnny. Go ahead.
So I want to talk about the police. Also, nice dog, by the way, earlier.
Thank you. Yeah, his name is Coconut. He's our studio dog. What's on your mind tonight?
So I'm from New York, and I want to talk about the police. Like, some cops are bad and stuff, and, especially in New York with the NYPD, like the corruption and stuff. But, like, what would be the alternative? Like, if we abolish the police, how are we going to get rid of all the niggers?
Okay, can't say that on broadcast radio, so we're going to hit the dump button
He's
there.
just a stupid troll. He called in last night just to go.
Oh, did he really?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's the same guy that said, the Beavis and Butthead sound. Yeah. It's so stupid.
Yeah, every now and then.
It's always a giveaway, isn't it?
Yeah, every now and then the teenagers in some chat room or whatever will find out about Free Talk Live, and they'll call in with just the dumbest crank calls in the world.
And it's so stupid because, first of all, like, it's not even like they said anything funny, and second of all, they will not get on the radio.
Yeah,
you're not going to hear this on the radio.
No, didn't make it, bro.
And it's like, I just don't see how you get entertainment from that.
Well, you've never been a teenage boy.
They get some kind of entertainment out of it. I think it's worth, addressing the question to some extent, though. In the absence of
can you
a
restate the question without the profanity so our listeners know what the question was?
Yeah, in the absence of a government monopoly on policing, we would probably have local communities hiring private security in order to, handle whatever the issue is.
Mm-hmm.
And then they would be, hold on, this is the big kicker, would be responsible for their actions.
Mm.
They wouldn't be able to lean on a man's throat for 5 minutes until he dies without consequences. They wouldn't be able to do any variety of things that an average person couldn't do. And this is important, ladies and gentlemen, because badges don't grant you extra rights. A badge, like I can only give you the rights that I have. You can act as an agent for me. And that's true for anybody else too. You can act as an agent for 100 different people.
Mm-hmm.
But those 100 people don't have more rights than the one person you're arresting.
That's a great way to put it.
Your actions are you're completely responsible for those actions inside of whatever you do in a given day. So, if a cop does something wrong, he should be held responsible for it. And in the history of this nation, it's only relatively new that they don't. It's a Supreme Court ruling, I think, from the 60s or something that's created qualified immunity.
Wow. Yeah, that's a great way to put it. You can't hire someone, even hire them as a representative to the United States or hire them as a cop, and somehow magically, because there's a middleman, you get to give them the right to harm people when no one had the right before. Nobody has.
Not if all of us are created equal. You certainly don't have a right to harm someone.
And the other thing about a right, what is a right? I think that doesn't get defined enough. A right is any action that you can possibly think of. You could think of them for days. You could spend lots of time thinking of this. Any action that you do with your body or your voice that doesn't harm anyone else. That's a right. And
what if
I
it
just
hurts
think
their
that
feelings?
Still your right to say it.
What?
It's their right to walk away from you.
What if it really hurts their feelings?
Hurting your feelings is one thing, but if you're saying threatening someone,
That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying it hurts their feelings.
Yeah,
they say, you hurt my feelings.
It's still your right to say something that hurts someone's feelings because it's their right to block you, if it's like Twitter, or walk away from you.
I think the answer there is that they're in control. They are responsible for their feelings. Whether they want to admit that they control them or not is another question.
A lot of people are not on that level yet.
Yeah, no, they're not. But the old, what was it? I don't know if it was Pee Wee Herman or whoever that said, "Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me." Right? So that's an old children's saying for a reason, because if your feelings are hurt, it's because you decided to be hurt. You decided to feel hurt by what somebody else said.
I don't know who originally said this, but Carla Gericke has quoted it a lot.
She's the Free State Project ex-president.
She has said a lot that she was inspired by a quote she heard, I don't know from who, that goes, "There are no annoying people." And a lot of the times when I say, "Ugh, he's so annoying," about someone, that quote just pops in my head, and I'm like, ugh, I just know it's true. There aren't, quote, annoying people. There's just you reacting that you are annoyed by them, and you can choose not to. And it takes work to try not to be annoyed by someone, but you can do it. I just decided to stop being annoyed by this pretty talkative, not very, let's just say, somebody who would be pretty commonly considered annoying by most people, woman that I worked with. I was just getting so worked up about how much she annoyed me every day and I had to deal with her every day. And one day I just thought, all I can do is choose not to be annoyed by her. So I would just say, I'm not annoyed by her in my own head or whatever. And I would start to say, I like her. And it was a couple days, I just started to really like her. Then we started to actually become friends. And now I really love that woman.
Such a cool story. Let's continue here. I think we may actually have Mark back in Georgia. Mark, are you with us now?
Yeah, I'm here.
All right, you're on the air, sir. Go ahead. Listening in Chattanooga.
That last guy was out of hand, buddy. I'll tell you what.
Yeah, well, we dumped his call, so he never made it to the radio. You heard him because you were on hold, but that never made it to the radio.
Yeah, that was horrible, man. But what I wanted to talk about was gun control, you know?
Yes, sir.
They're talking about all these bans and stuff. How are they going to ban me going to the Home Depot and buying some stuff to make a gun, you know?
They're never going to ban that. They can't possibly, right? In fact, there were people who, you've heard of the gun buybacks where they'll pay like $200 for anybody turning in a gun. The real smart guys will go to Home Depot and buy, you know, all the piping or whatever necessary to just screw a quick cheap gun
$20
together.
gun, I
Yeah,
don't know.
like a $15 or $20 gun, and then take it to the gun buyback and get a check for
$200.
$200.
It's crazy.
I might do that, buddy.
Yeah.
But like the real thing, they're talking about banning all of these when they should be banning the real problems, you know?
What's that? The government ban? Can we just ban the government? Because I think that would solve a lot of problems.
No, buddy. Black people.
All right, we're gonna let.
Yeah, I knew it.
Just a pretty boring. When the people call, I don't really have to hit the dump button on that, but I'm just gonna do it anyway because why not?
Yeah, it's like,
Just-
don't give him the satisfaction of making it to the radio.
Yeah.
I could totally tell that he was a troll from the beginning because he was like, that last guy in his fake accent.
Well, he was smart enough to try to claim that he was calling from an actual radio station. Most of them aren't that smart. But we also have caller ID, and he was calling us from Toronto. He had a Toronto phone number, so I didn't really believe him for a moment that he was in Georgia.
Oh.
I mean, maybe he could be from Toronto, living in Georgia, but given that we're being
It was
we're
an
being
obviously fake
deluged.
accent.
Yeah, we're being deluged with fake callers here tonight. Anyway, going on. The number, if you want to join the show, 603-283-6160. Let's talk to Skeeter in California. You're on Free Talk Live, Skeeter.
I wish he was a fake caller.
Yeah. He's real. Go ahead,
Oh,
Skeeter.
hey.
At least you're real. Go ahead.
Yeah, hey. I originally had like 3 points I wanted to get, but now like listening to you more, like being forced to listen to you on hold, I have like 5. I thought Bonnie was talking about me for a second when she was talking about
I don't know if we're going to get to all 5, so why don't you pick the most important one and start with that?
Okay, I can get them all 5 out quickly. Bonnie,
No, you can't, because we got to respond to them. So go ahead.
Yeah, that's not the way we do
they'll
this.
They'll be really fast where you can just process and respond. So Bonnie, first off with the rights, you have to exclude children with that. Number 2.
Okay, no, this
we're
isn't
not
how we
gonna
do
go through
this.
number 2.
Just mute him in.
We're going to talk about number 1 here. When you say you have to exclude children, what do you mean?
Like you said, you guys can parent can intervene even against child wishes, right? You guys admitted this. I mean, at least Ian did.
It's not
Bonnie,
that
haven't
I
gotten her yet.
admitted that you're right. It's that I have the common sense to know that children are not fully and I mean, not everyone magically becomes not a child at 18. But if we're talking about I would say pretty universally, everyone below 10 years old is not able to make most decisions by themselves. And it's not that I'm excluding children from having rights to do things that don't harm people. It's just that sometimes a child doesn't know that if they run out into the road, they will get hit by a car and die. They just think, shut up for a second, I'm talking. They will just think, I want to run. So you're not harming them by stopping them from running. You just have to put them in a place where they can run freely without getting hurt.
I want to hear Mark weigh in on this one because he actually has a child.
Yeah, what I would say regarding
So?
that is there was a police officer recently that jailed his son for pooping his pants.
I think they talked about this last night on the show.
It was a brief jailing, but it's a fascinating thing that we're saying here. Is it true that children don't have the same rights as adults? Yeah. Are we training them so that they do? I think that's true too. I think it's an interesting adversarial relationship that Skeeter has created for himself with Free Talk Live, because I don't necessarily disagree with him, but I sure feel like I do.
Go ahead, Skeeter, with point number 2.
Okay. I want to address it, but I'll let that go. We'll discuss that another time. Number 2, I think what Mark said about private police, whatever. I think in a non-democratic market, that's kind of what I want to call a free market, what you guys call a free market. I think that the basis of a justice system starts with a reputation system. There's scary consequences to that too, like no privacy. Number 3, let's see.
Okay, hold on a second. Now, when you say a reputation system, no privacy, I mean, can you expound on that a little bit more? Like, what are you talking about?
Information is cheap, so this is where your justice system will start. It will be somewhat like, imagine like a crypto Wikipedia. I'm just envisioning where everybody can input any information that's non-deletable. It's a little complex. I think we should let this go for a second. You can talk about. I'll bring.
Well,
that
don't
up.
bring something up if you don't want to talk about it on the radio. Okay.
Incredibly
I
boring.
do.
Oh.
I think that it's so let's take a look for a second at credit card companies. Do credit card companies treat everybody the same? And the answer is, do credit card companies treat everybody the same?
Yeah. Credit.
They don't.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. They absolutely don't treat everybody the same because people don't deserve to be treated the same.
Yeah.
There are people
It's
out
like,
there who do not deserve 1 penny from you because they will steal it given any opportunity. And, I think that in many cases, Americans really are not prepared for a world where an organization doesn't, like a government organization that's like a government doesn't treat them the same as their neighbor, but they don't deserve to be treated the same as their neighbor. They may deserve to be treated better. They may deserve to be treated worse, but they don't deserve to be treated the same.
Are you saying, like, if we lived in a world more based on reputation, some people would get treated better than others, and people aren't ready for that?
I also think that the reputation system would be twisted by whomever is out there. For instance, I have applied for a credit card through Bank of America, and because of some past business with the Shire Free Church, I can't get it.
Wow.
But I can get the best credit card in
It's not
America,
funny.
right? But I can't get a crappy old Bank of America card.
Yeah, but right now it's like it's not really apples and oranges to compare the way things are now with the banking system to like a world that we're talking about where the government doesn't have so much sway. I just don't think that, like, if you didn't want to, if Bank of America, if the biggest the biggest bank was just willy-nilly not accepting people would be like, okay, screw you, I'm going to go over here. But right now they all work together to hold people like the Shire Free Church in positions where they're unable to bank.
I think that there will be unfairness and that there will be no recourse. But there currently is,
What?
He's talking about in this free market future
world,
that there will be
where-
unfairness and no recourse. The recourse in a free market is to take
basic
market
stuff.
actions and to, spread the word about businesses that are treating people poorly and get people to use their buying power to not do business with those people. That's the recourse.
If we're talking, I think he's trying to talk.
Go ahead, Skeeter. What now?
But if you can kind of imagine, imagine a free market version of like that Chinese social credit score. Unfortunately,
there
what
would
the
be
free
no
market will
free
do.
market version of that because that is a monopolistic system enforced by gunpoint
But there
by
could
a
be
government.
Okay, yeah, that the Chinese one is right now. But I think what Skeeter's saying is there could be a privatized one where people
There could be.
want to get high ratings, so they want to agree to be a part of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that
It's like
absolutely
Death
could be
Note
the case. And if that's the case, then that's fine because at least then it's voluntary to participate in
And there
that.
could be multiple companies doing this. If someone finds out that this one company doing it is unfairly, rating Mexicans low because they don't like Mexicans, people can say, well, screw them, I'm going to go to this other
Skeeter, let's move
company.
to number 3, I think, on your list of things.
Which is originally my number one. But okay, so I heard just a little. I wrote this down. So just a little more insight into my position before I start. I heard Mark say just a little while ago that government isn't a profit-seeking entity. And this is the reason why I say government and all types of democracy short of a pure market are immoral, as opposed to you guys who say that government is immoral simply because of the fact they use aggression as a tool.
Okay, so what's the reason you're saying they're immoral?
They're not. So remember I said to you before that they're inefficient at connecting supply and demand. You could say it another way is that they're not a profit-seeking entity.
Okay, what's the
therefore-
reason
so
why they're immoral in your mind?
It's because the game of democracy, in game theory, democracy can be analyzed as a game, right? And I don't mean to trivialize a game. A game is just saying a bunch of actors with incentives and costs and see what happens. Like you can analyze what happens using like rational motives. Like in a democracy, again, you've probably heard of like concentration of benefits and distribution of costs. This is what democracies and like representative democracies like republics do. Like, and it's logical. Right? This is the logical outcome of when you instill a system of distribution of resources, or at least partly, with taxation.
Well, the logical aspect of government is when there are reverse incentives, as there are with the state, you are going to have people behave in a certain way. But you haven't explained to me why you think that governments are immoral.
Immoral or moral?
Again, I'm immoral. I am
That's what he
evolutionary. Said. Ultimately, I'm an evolutionary utilitarian, so my morality stems from evolution. So, let me state my principle, my one and only principle, that I never rationally violate, unlike you guys with children, right? So,
no, I don't, and I told you I don't.
My only principle is to serve the highest evolutionary being. I know it sounds, and in are you
talking about God?
Everyday, no.
The highest evolutionary being. What does that mean?
He's just using a different term for whatever is the highest good for the human race.
This is according to you, right?
No. Human race is a stepping stone, right? Like AI, for example, might be a better surviving entity in evolution.
Well, right now they're not.
So you will serve. Just to clarify, and this is interesting because Skeeter, I don't think you've said this before. Your highest principle is to serve the highest evolutionary being. So presumably, if aliens or robots or something else like that comes into the picture, you believe that they are more evolved, you will become their servant.
I mean, that's why I was trying to use a different word than serve, but I will try to maximize. No, I won't necessarily maximize any means to the end, right? But the end itself. So all of those, what you mentioned, were just means to the end, the perfection, right?
The end of perfection. Which would be some people would define that as God, right? Like that humankind is trying to. I know you're saying no, but some people would define that as God, because God is the perfect, and the idea is that humans are trying to seek that. In fact, we learned recently that Mormons actually believe to some extent. I'm not sure if I can state exactly what their beliefs are, but that they are trying to seek to become as God,
their own gods,
as
I
understand
not
it.
Over themselves, but a god on a new planet, and they populate it with their wife.
But are you like an atheist or something, Skeeter? Is that why when I say those things, you're kind of recoiling at it?
Yeah. Okay. Just like you guys, you can probably see sometimes I see my atheistic leanings.
Okay, well,
I do deify evolution. I kind of like worship it. I mean, it only makes sense. This is where all our instincts come from. It's where all our moralities it's why evolution gave us morality. How does
evolution give us morality if you don't believe in actual morality? There can't be objective morality if you're a utilitarianism or a utilitarian.
And that is a question we'll have to save for another time with Skeeter, because we want to make sure other people can get on the show. So I understand you had 5 points, Skeeter, but call us another night and get to whatever the other ones were. So thanks for the call.
He contradicts himself so often. He calls himself something like a market believer, but he also believes in the government controlling the markets, and
he's a utilitarian, so he believes in whatever he thinks is the best.
And that's the thing. The definition of a utilitarian is to not have any principle. So whatever he was trying to explain about his principle, it doesn't even make sense to have one if you're a utilitarian. Just the definition of the word is kind of what he was trying to say. It's not a principle.
Skeeter's operating on a level way above us.
No,
I don't know about
not.
that. He seems like a really confused guy, but at least we can talk to him without having to hit the dump machine. There's more coming up here in moments. Hour number 3 is on the way. The number is 603-283-6160. It is Free Talk Live. Do you prefer to listen to Free Talk Live on your schedule on demand? You can find the link to our podcast at feeds.freetalklive.com. which features the daily digest of our radio show 7 days a week. Just drop our RSS feed into your favorite podcast client or subscribe to us on the large platforms if you prefer, including Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, iHeartMedia, Spotify, and Stitcher. All the links are at feeds.freetalklive.com. If the daily digests aren't enough for you and you really don't want to miss a moment of Free Talk Live, you can always sign up for our AMPS Patreon at amps.freetalklive.com for just $5 a month, and you'll get the full radio show without recorded commercials. Plus, you'll help us advertise, market, promote, and support Free Talk Live. That's amps.freetalklive.com to join AMPS, or feeds.freetalklive.com to get our main podcast, or find us on the major podcast platforms.
Looking for a great real estate investment? Consider New Hampshire, which is ground zero for the Liberty Movement. Your first call should be to Mark Worden from Porcupine Real Estate. He's more than just a real estate agent. He's your New Hampshire concierge. Where are the best places to live? Do you want farm, city, the burbs, or forest? Do you want a duplex or multifamily building so that renters pay your mortgage? There are homes in all price ranges in New Hampshire, and Mark can help with financing too. Invest in Liberty and property. Mark Worden can help.
PorcupineRealEstate.com.
Tired of cancel culture? Sick of mega tech corporations holding an axe over your head? Join the LRN.FM Matrix chat server. It's self-hosted, so no one else can tell us what to do or say. Don't like the existing channels? You can make your own. You can even connect into some of our channels from other Matrix servers. It's federated. For the full LRN.FM Matrix experience, though, you should join our server via the step-by-step instructions at chat.lrn.fm. Chat.lrn.fm.
You're listening to the live edition of Free Talk Live. Hour number 3 is next after the news here on the Liberty Radio Network at LRN.FM.
From Feature Story News in Washington, I'm Nick Harper. Authorities in France say that the riots that have been taking place across the country since last Tuesday appear to be reducing in number and intensity. 200 people were arrested on Sunday, down from a high of 1,300 2 days before. FSN's Ross Cullen reports from Paris.
Well, here in Paris, the mayor, Anne Hidalgo, led a counter-protest earlier on Monday, saying that she unreservedly condemns the violence that has been taking place for a week now. The president, Emmanuel Macron, met senior politicians on Monday and said there would continue to be a massive police presence in the bid to finally contain the rioting and the looting. If the violence continues on Monday, it would mark a 7th straight night of arson and vandalism, sparked by the fatal shooting of a 17-year-old boy by police last week. Ross Cullen, Paris.
Travel chaos is plaguing US airports ahead of the Independence Day holiday. Over 100 million Americans are under extreme weather warnings, and more than 1,000 flights have been delayed or cancelled as of Monday morning. FSN's US correspondent Kate Fisher reports.
It follows one of the busiest air travel weekends on record, with Sunday seeing the highest number of passengers ever screened at US airports. But severe storms are threatening a swathe of the eastern US, while the south and west continue to bake in a heatwave. 36 million Americans are on alert for dangerously high temperatures. Kate Fisher in Washington.
Investigators are continuing to search for multiple suspects following a mass shooting in the US city of Baltimore on Sunday. 2 people were killed and dozens injured, mostly teenagers, at an annual neighborhood street party. At least 9 people have been killed in an Israeli attack on a Palestinian refugee camp in the city of Jenin. Drones were deployed and gunfire was heard across the city in what Israeli forces have called a counter-terrorism effort. Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas, though, has called the incident a new war crime against our defenseless people. The US markets saw stocks rise narrowly on Monday, kicking off the second half of what's been a largely strong year on Wall Street. FSN's Benji Hire reports.
Monday's shortened session marked the start of a new trading month, a new quarter, a new half. Shares in Tesla jumped as the electric car company delivered a record number of vehicles last quarter, making up in part for another wild few days for Tesla and Twitter CEO Elon Musk, on the receiving end of backlash from users after he introduced limits on the number of posts people can read on the social media platform. The billionaire announced the temporary measure to address extreme levels of data scraping on the site. Also on the rise, shares of major banks, Wells Fargo and Goldman Sachs, both gaining after raising dividends.
From Bureaus Worldwide, this is FSN.
With FSN Spotlight, I'm Simon Marks, with more today about the riots in France following the killing last week of a 17-year-old by police during a traffic stop. On Sunday, the grandmother of the dead teen urged people across the country to stop rioting. But the crisis has created a massive fresh challenge for French President Emmanuel Macron, just months after the country was brought to a standstill by separate protests over proposed changes to the pension age. Sophie Pedder is France correspondent for The Economist.
That was a completely different demographic. That was old people, organised protests that then became violent in the evenings with arson and torching of cars, torching of rubbish bins. It was troublemakers piggybacking on a very different sort of protests. This has started in the banlieue, the sort of high-rise housing estates that ring a lot of cities. And there is a real concern about policing. It's about the use of firearms by police when they are asking people to stop and when they're trying to, enforce traffic law. Added to that is a sense that in a lot of these banlieues, where there's a very sort of big minority population, that the police is picking on young minority residents.
There are very long-standing grievances in many of those suburbs, rooted in France's colonial past and in discrimination that young immigrants say they've experienced in widespread areas of life. With FSN Spotlight, I'm Simon Marks.
And the main news again, authorities in France say that the riots that have been taking place since last Tuesday are starting to reduce in number and intensity. Travel chaos is plaguing US airports ahead of the Independence Day holiday. Investigators are continuing to search for suspects following the mass shooting in Baltimore over the weekend, and US markets rose narrowly on Monday, starting the second half of 2023. That's Feature Story News. Nick Harper reporting.
Right now, it's looking like tonight's record $500 million Powerball drawing could be cancelled, as embarrassed lottery officials have admitted they lost the balls. Douglas Bronstein, deputy director of the Multi-State Lottery Association, addressed the press moments ago. We have a quote. "We know how important the balls are to a successful drawing. I saw them the other day, and I'm sure they'll turn up somewhere." Bronstein says it's usually marketing director Ben Callahan's job to keep an eye on the balls, but when reached for comment, Callahan said he just sits next to the balls. It's not his job to know where they are every second of every day. According to Bronstein, it's crucial they find the balls before tonight's drawing. Quote, "We'd love to use different balls, but these ones have the numbers on them." Bronstein added that once they figure out where the balls are, they promise to keep them in some sort of case instead of just lying around the office. When we return, we'll meet some of the undeterred Powerball superfans who are camping out before the big drawing dressed as their favorite numbers.
This is the Onion News Network.
Yep, we still do email. Drop your email address in the entry box at freetalklive.com, and you'll be kept in the loop with Free Talk Live. Free Talk Live.
It is Free Talk Live, and you can join the show here. You can bring up anything you want. The number is 603-283-6160. It is Independence Eve, and of course, you're certainly welcome to call in about that topic. And it's time, once again, to declare independence from, this time, the United States, the tyranny of 535 drunken maniacs in Washington, D.C., and their president. Here in the studio tonight, it's Ian.
It's Bonnie.
And remotely, we have...
Mark.
Mark is with us all the way down in Costa Rica tonight. And we're going to continue with the calls, even though the majority of them tonight have been terrible, what I would call crank calls. And these are not people with serious topics. They're just people trying to get something out on the radio that could be offensive.
So why do it to your listeners?
Why do what?
Why take calls if
because that's what we do.
Well, we don't know that the next call is going to be a...
Why continue to do it?
Well, we don't know if the next call is going to be...
I got a suicide pact!
Right. We don't know if one of those...
You don't owe these people anything?
Yeah, but we do take calls here on Free Talk Live, and it is an open phone show, so I'm going to do it.
Doesn't get to the listener if they say the N-word or whatever.
No, it never gets to the radio, but even though Alfonso, our next caller, ostensibly from California, did admit to me while I was screening his call that he when I asked him what by what means he was listening, all he would say was the internet, and he would not be more specific about it. And he admitted that he admitted that he found the show through a Telegram channel. And when I asked him what the channel was,
some Cantwell band channel,
he said it was classified. So at least his answers were kind of entertaining.
What if the name of the channel is in fact classified?
It could be. I don't know if he's a Fed or not, but he's on the air now. Alfonso, you're on Free Talk Live. Hopefully you can do better than your predecessors have, but I'm not. I don't have my hopes up. I guess I'll say that.
Well, explain to him, Alfonso. Let me just explain what a dump button is. A dump button is something that.
Terrible explanation, Mark, because you're getting
you're breaking up really
all over
bad.
the place. Alfonso, a dump button basically means that
Hey, you're a nigger.
Okay, yep, and he's one of them. And now we're gonna hit the dump button.
I mean, Mark does have a point, Ian. Like during the screening, you were pretty sure he was.
I was certain of it. Yeah, in fact.
Who does it bring value to for you to answer a thing like that? We just missed 10 seconds or whatever it is, 30 seconds of the show.
No, it is bad.
Like, do people want to listen to a show that has 3 flushes in it?
I'm just hoping for the best from humanity here, okay? I'm hoping that we can get
That's why you need to get into your skull.
somewhat intelligent conversation
that
from
they're
one of
all
these tools.
not even somewhat, mostly not even somewhat intelligent.
You're saying these aren't even human callers?
No, I'm saying in the United States, 90% of people don't read anything, and they're stupid.
Is that true?
I made it up.
Making that up? Okay. All right. So anyway, Mark's having some internet difficulties over there. Hopefully he'll pop back in and
it's just like if you just accepted that what I'm saying is true, you would be happier. It's like a dog when a dog gets trained and
I'm very happy. Are you saying you think I'm unhappy?
I'm not. I don't think you're unhappy, but hoping for humanity to be a certain way when it's just not the reality is not a good place to live in. Just be content with where we are, and then we can move on from there. Like we need to educate people on what rights are, for example.
Well,
if you go and ask somebody what a right is,
I would feel bad though, Bonnie, about cutting off all young-sounding males from the show. You know, every now and then
it's different if there's been 2 and they're doing the same Beavis and Butthead giggles, and they say, "I can't tell you the Telegram chat; it's classified."
What, Mark?
Right, this is just dumb. This isn't like this is just you being bullheaded about, well, I started a radio program in 2002 and I called it Free Talk Live.
Our crank callers were way better back then.
Changed, man.
Yeah, our crank callers were way better. We had like really talented people doing voices.
I would not even be mad if.
And the crank callers that you have now weren't even born.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. They've gotten worse, sadly. I mean, we've had some bad crankers over the years, too. I mean, there's definitely no doubt about that. But, you know, every now and then we get a young person calling in.
It's not even a crank call to just say the N-word on the radio. It's stupid.
It's a terrible, worst kind of crank call.
That's why I think it's just a Cantwell.
That's what's happened, though. It used to be you had to have something to crank with. You had to say, hey, is your refrigerator running? Well, you got to go out and catch it. Like you had to be prepared
Creative. Yeah,
with
you had to have something. Right.
But now, you know, people just go into chat rooms and spam the N-word until they get blocked.
Mm-hmm.
There's just no intelligence to it.
Yeah.
Why might that be?
Dumb.
Do you think that people are largely stupid in the United States? Mark?
I don't know whether stupid is the right term I would use, but you know, I don't think people in the United States are any different than people anyplace else.
Say, yeah, the rest of the world.
I don't think there's much difference there. I mean, IQ is IQ.
Yeah. Let's go to the phones here.
I don't think that that's different.
One of the
but
things
what I would say is
one of the things we could do here is
Did you mute him?
No, I think he's delayed.
Oh.
One of the things that we could do here is I could, you know, prohibit all young-sounding males from calling the show when we know that there's crank calling going on. But I think that's unfortunate because then we're going to be pre-discriminating against what could be, in theory, a young male that isn't a dipwad that is going to be calling into the show that night. I mean, the odds that would happen probably pretty low, and maybe we'd be safe doing that. Just
How often
prohibiting
does a
them?
new male with something new young male with something interesting to say actually call into Free Talk Live with just a intelligent
I don't
question?
know. Not often enough. You're right about that, Bonnie. Let's go to the phones here, though. We got CW in Arizona listening to K-Talks. Go ahead, CW.
Yes, I have about 10 or 15 points I need to get to really quick.
Oh, God.
Pick a couple. Go ahead, CW.
Oh, I'm just joking.
I know,
No,
I know.
man.
It was a good one.
I'm used to the crank callers because on KTOX, our local station, man, we get these bozos all day, every day. Like most of the week, these bozos are calling in. And I'm sure they're the same people.
They could be.
But yeah, don't discriminate against young-sounding males. I mean, I sound like an old man, but I am pretty young.
You don't sound that old, CW. I mean, if I had to guess, I'd say you're in your
30s?
late 30s, early 40s.
I think I'm turning 37. I believe so,
All right.
30, 36 or something like that.
Yeah, that's not old, dude. That's
But
that's like
anyways.
maybe middle-aged at best.
That's not middle-aged.
I just want to
40s
tell
middle-aged.
Mark, man, I hope he finds a good lemonade stand to where he can buy a good drink of lemonade because he's breaking up. You might as well just go find the next stand and start drinking lemonade.
I don't know. Do they sell lemonade down in Costa Rica?
But they sell amazing fruit juices that are actually not pasteurized.
Yeah,
and-
you probably get some.
Real.
You probably get some
real good
naranja. Jugo de naranja. What are you drinking down there, Mark? What do you get on the streets?
He's right. They make lemonade with sparkling water here.
Oh, nice.
So that's to them a lime and a lemon are the same thing,
Mm.
and they just squeeze that into gaseous water, and it's great.
Sounds amazing.
Awesome. All right, CW, were you calling about anything?
But I think
No,
I think he might be right about my connection, though.
I hear you now. You're fine now.
Yeah, you're okay now.
Well, no, I was just kind of calling to troll because I haven't heard this. I mean, I've been listening for quite a while, and I took a break, and I haven't heard the dump button that many times. So I just decided to call and troll a little bit. But I do love fruit juice in sparkling water. It's the best. Not the pre-made crap with the flavoring in sparkling
Right,
water.
right.
You got to actually pour your own grape
Make it
juice
yourself.
or-
Yeah. You get your
or
own
a
100%
little-
juice and mix it up with the
or-
sparkling.
Or apple cider vinegar with a
Mhm.
little maple syrup or agave.
How about
That is-
taking the sparkling fruit juice and popping it into popsicles in the freezer? That's another one.
Oh, I've never tried that.
That's a fun one.
Okay, I've never.
Yeah, me either.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I've had people do that. but-
One thing I've been
All right,
doing recently.
Thank you guys.
Hey,
And
thanks,
it's-
CW.
It's elite. What I've been doing is taking some frozen strawberries, some fresh watermelon, and whatever else, the little things you want to add in. Those are like the important things. Put it in a blender, and also with a couple mint leaves, peppermint leaves or whatever.
Do you do any ice in that?
No, I'd make this like thick mixture.
Mhm.
You gotta have a good amount of frozen stuff so it's thick, especially frozen strawberries. That makes it really sweet. Maybe add a little honey in there too if you want it sweeter. And then you pour that over ice. Then you take a regular plain sparkling mineral water like I have here, Gerolsteiner, and that turns it into basically like, and fresh lime juice. And it turns it into like a strawberry limeade. It's so good.
Mm-hmm. What about Sarah in New Mexico? Sarah, what do you like to mix up fruit juice-wise at home?
Juice.
You don't drink juice?
No, I like the Crystal Light sugar-free.
Oh, God. Didn't you hear that aspartame gives people
that's
cancer?
the aspartame one, yeah. Crystal or ice crystal or something.
Well, the thing is, everything else is gonna kill you. I mean, what the sugar's gonna kill you? Is anything really better than anything
The
else?
thing about aspartame is I specifically do not want neurotoxins. I love my brain. I don't want to end up with a brain injury. I mean, I already had some. I've had concussions, and I don't want to lose any brain cells. You don't just grow those back, I don't think.
Well, I think that's don't you have to have a whole bunch? They did you gotta have 100 times for the rats to have damage. They overhype it, as long.
That is true. A
It's
lot
not
of the
all that
studies on, let's say, like ecstasy or whatever, they did
That's
very,
what
very
you
heavy.
say.
Actually,
I
ABC
disagree.
News reported on this years ago.
Yeah, and they lie about lots of stuff.
Well, I mean, you can look it up
so-
yourself, but they hit these study participants or the rats or whatever with very, very high doses to the point where
Right.
of course, they're going to have some sort of negative or deleterious effect. I mean, it is definitely true, Sarah. You're going to die, so if you really love Crystal Light and aspartame, you might as well enjoy it while you're still here on the planet. What were you calling about tonight?
Yes, I wanted to tell you. Did you know today is the post office celebration day, acknowledgement day?
No, I
we
didn't.
had that-
Bonnie, you went to the post office today. Did you
It's
celebrate
so
them?
weird because today, if that's true, if it's Post Office Acknowledgement Day, they're doing this lady wrong because the kiosk was broken. There was like 10 people in line, and they had one lady working there today, and she was all like, "I'm sorry for the wait. I'm sorry for the wait," and I was just like, "Dang! Like, did everyone take off at the same day?"
Here's something you might not know, Sarah. They're raising postal rates again. I spotted this today in the Consumer World report, consumerworld.org. That's the company that's behind Mouseprint, which is the site that kind of keeps an eye on like prices going up, shrinkflation, etc. And they say the Postal Service is going to be increasing mailing rates on July 9th. Yet again, I mean, it has gone up and up and up. It feels like it was just a few years ago that it was like 50 cents. Now it's going to be 66 cents. Sarah, are we supposed to appreciate them for continually raising rates?
Well, I don't know why they take the money and then they need to hire more postal workers and give us better service, but since it's government owned, they don't have to be competitive. But
right.
The thing is that Paul, remember that in Texas, he died working delivering mail under heat exhaustion. I mean,
no,
that's completely pitiful. I mean, he collapsed.
Well, if there's enough people doing a job, Sarah, somebody's going to die.
Yeah, that's true.
Right?
I mean, it's Texas.
There's people on roofs that fall off every day, but we don't have a roofer appreciation society, right?
Well,
I mean, we don't stop. We don't take a day off and say, well, we've got to really just think about the roofers.
Hey, thanks for the call tonight, Sarah. I appreciate it. 66 cents is going up from 63 cents. We looked not too long ago at the list of, how often they've raised the rates. They've been raising them a lot more recently, it seems like, than they did previously.
On stamps and stuff?
Yeah, first-class stamps. Anyway, that's some news for you. The number is 603-283-6160. We were talking earlier about
there's people who die doing talk shows. I mean, don't we need to have a day for that?
Like last year, there was some man that died in his home studio while on the air. I don't remember who it was, unfortunately.
What about that idiot that had his girlfriend shoot him through like a phone book and died?
Oh God!
Whoa, I've never heard of that.
In other news from the Consumer World report, bottles of Huai Fong Sriracha are going for as much as $70 on some websites amid a shortage of the popular hot sauce.
Is that
linked
like
to
the
ongoing
typical
droughts.
brand that we see, with the green
Yes,
top?
Huai Fong with the green top. Yep, exactly, with the rooster.
Yep.
On the bottle, a single 28-ounce bottle is being listed on eBay for nearly $70. Now, whether they're going to get it or not, that's the question. That what they need to look at is the completed sales.
Yeah.
What are they actually selling for? 2-pack of 17-ounce bottles is being asked for $100 or more on Amazon right now. Other brands' iterations of the sauce on the sites are notably less expensive, but prices for Huai Fong's authentic version are being driven up by an ongoing shortage of the chili peppers that are used to make the condiment. The company announced a shortage of chili pepper inventory back in 2020, and I remember there was
news about this, like 2 years ago or 1 year ago.
Yeah, within the last couple of years, we went to a New Hampshire restaurant that we like, the Red Arrow, which has normally they've got some sriracha on the tables, and they didn't. And we asked about it, and they were like, "Yeah, we can't get it."
Yeah, that's just like impossible to find right now. Yeah, that happened a couple of years ago. I don't know. Seems like a little.
Apparently, it's back. Weather conditions, they said last year, were affecting quality and sparking a more severe shortage. The company's based in California and reportedly supplied by chili pepper farms in California, New Mexico, and Mexico. CBS News reported Thursday that the spokesperson for the company said they've recently resumed limited production, but is facing a shortage of raw material and has, quote, no estimations of when supply will increase. This is a true tragedy. in the marketplace. I am very sorry to hear that this is happening. But I mean, to anybody that hoarded themselves some sriracha, they could be making some big money. I wonder if Jay is cashing in on this. One of our longtime listeners, he likes to buy things and resell them on eBay, and he's always like really on the ball with knowing what people are going to be looking for.
Yeah, he it's not like he buys women's clothes, and he knows exactly what's going on with the supply chains with them. I'm just always impressed by his like wide array of silly knowledge.
If you want to join the show here, you can. Again, the number is 603-283-6160. Let's go to the phones here. Caller, you're on Free Talk Live. Go ahead.
Hi, Ian. It's Bonnie's mom.
Oh, hey.
Hi.
You're on the air.
Hey, I wanted to ask you, because I'm interested, since tomorrow is Independence Day, what is your view and Bonnie's view on our founding fathers and on the War for Independence, 1776, and the whole typical theme of that?
I think they gave it a good try. I mean, they really had some good ideas. A lot of the things that are in the Bill of Rights and the Declaration of Independence are really just absolutely well written, very, very, fantastic concepts that are still with us, at least in mind today, and a lot of us appreciate that. So I think they gave us a good basis of ideas from which to start, but unfortunately, as we all know, the federal government has not respected those rights, and they continue to grow, and they continue to become more oppressive and destructive of our freedoms and those rights. And so that's why we've been talking about independence a lot here on Free Talk Live over the years, of getting away from the oppression of the federal government, because ultimately what they created, and I don't think they intended this, I mean, they just intended to get away from the tyranny of the king at the time, which was a good intention, but as they say, the road to hell is a lot of times paved with good intentions.
I tend to agree that I don't think it was just a scam from the beginning, because they wrote too many good things. Like, why even give us the right to bear arms if it was just a scam?
They're not giving you the right.
I know, but I'm just saying, why even add that into your documents if it's just a scam from the beginning? I think it probably was began with good intentions, and some of the best of them, like Thomas Jefferson, acknowledged that as time goes by, a lot of this is going to get corrupted, and the tree of liberty will need to be watered with the blood of tyrants.
Well, I don't necessarily support violence as the solution. I think that will just lead us back to where we began. But ultimately, it has failed.
That's an actual quote from him.
No, it is. It is a quote. I'm saying I disagree with violence as a solution, because that's what's alluded to in that particular quote.
Yeah, but back then, the way that things was just that every American understood they had the right to own a gun.
Yeah,
and the entire country would have been a militia. A militia means like the government. Every citizen is not like the government, like the military.
Now, I know
every citizen is like the military.
I know Bonnie's mom here asked for Bonnie and I's opinion, but we do have Mark on the show here tonight. So, Mark, do you want to weigh in on this one?
Let's hope that the audio holds out. One thing I like to point out is that we actually have a A/B test. We have what it was like to have Englishmen in Canada, and what it was like to have Englishmen in the United States. In one case, the Englishmen said, "You know what? We're going to try it on our own." In the other case, they said that they weren't. And currently, the Cato Institute rates the two countries about as free as each other. That it appears as though the becoming independent didn't actually make us freer. And the old axiom of trading one ruler 5,000 miles away for 5,000 1 mile away, which one's going to make you freer? And I guess that the answer is it just doesn't matter much. I mean,
think that
Canada,
I just got to add something, Mark. I think that you can't really blame that on independence not working. I think it's a failure of the second step they took, which was to create the Union. The Constitution is way worse.
Everything that happened is what happened, right? And so, the results should be presumably a freer country, and it's not.
Well, I do want to point out to what you said, Mark. You looked at the Cato Institute when you were comparing Canada and the United States, and you are right. Cato does do, I believe, a study of economic freedom in North America. United States, most states do tend to rank higher than Canada. However, when you look at the overall numbers, Canada, at least according to the Heritage Institute, is whooping up on the United States on economic freedom, on their economic freedom rankings. Canada is ranked at number 16 in the world, and the U.S. is at number 25.
I find it I just won't say it because they shut down the accounts of the people who donated to the truckers. So
that's bad.
The Heritage Foundation can say whatever they want about how free Canada is, and the best I can do is call it even.
Okay, well, here's another one I found recently from visionofhumanity.org. I'd never seen this one before. It is the World Peace Index, which is interesting.
Yeah.
And on the World Peace Index, Canada is ranked at number 11, while the United States is at number 131.
One thing I really want to point out about the Founding Fathers and the Constitution is just the fact that it was a good try, but the experiment has clearly failed to actually create what they wanted to create.
Yeah,
So
it's time to try something different.
time to secede.
More freedom is the answer. More coming up. Some of you have wanted to support Free Talk Live's mission on a monthly basis, but don't want to support Patreon. Now we have an alternative that also helps our premier streaming platform, Odyssey. Visit video.freetalklive.com and click Join at the top of the channel. You can subscribe for $5 per month, and unlike other subscription services, Odyssey adds their processing fee on top, so it'll cost a little over $5 per month, but Free Talk Live will receive the entire amount you pledged. Higher donation tiers are available if you're feeling so inspired. You'll get a special membership badge that's visible in the Odyssey chat room, and if we get enough supporters, we may enable members-only chat. This new subscription method is a great way to decentralize our direct listener support away from just Patreon and also support a libertarian-run business, Odyssey. Please visit video.freetalklive.com and click Join to subscribe to our Odyssey channel and help support spreading our message around the planet. Visit video.freetalklive.com and click Join today.
From Feature Story News in Washington, I'm Nick Harper. Authorities in France say that the riots that have been taking place across the country since last Tuesday appear to be reducing in number and intensity. 200 people were arrested on Sunday, down from a high of 1,300 2 days before. FSN's Ross Cullen reports from Paris.
Well, here in Paris, the mayor, Anne Hidalgo, led a counter-protest earlier on Monday, saying that she unreservedly condemns the violence that has been taking place for a week now. The president, Emmanuel Macron, met senior politicians on Monday and said there would continue to be a massive police presence in the bid to finally contain the rioting and the looting. If the violence continues on Monday, it would mark a 7th straight night of arson and vandalism, sparked by the fatal shooting of a 17-year-old boy by police last week. Ross Cullen, Paris.
Travel chaos is plaguing US airports ahead of the Independence Day holiday. Over 100 million Americans are under extreme weather warnings, and more than 1,000 flights have been delayed or cancelled as of Monday morning. FSN's US correspondent Kate Fisher reports.
It follows one of the busiest air travel weekends on record, with Sunday seeing the highest number of passengers ever screened at US airports. But severe storms are threatening a swathe of the eastern US, while the south and west continue to bake in a heatwave. 36 million Americans are on alert for dangerously high temperatures. Kate Fisher in Washington.
Investigators are continuing to search for multiple suspects following a mass shooting in the US city of Baltimore on Sunday. 2 people were killed and dozens injured, mostly teenagers, at an annual neighborhood street party. At least 9 people have been killed in an Israeli attack on a Palestinian refugee camp in the city of Jenin. Drones were deployed and gunfire was heard across the city in what Israeli forces have called a counter-terrorism effort. Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas, though, has called the incident a new war crime against our defenseless people. The US markets saw stocks rise narrowly on Monday, kicking off the second half of what's been a largely strong year on Wall Street. FSN's Benji Hire reports.
Monday's shortened session marked the start of a new trading month, a new quarter, a new half. Shares in Tesla jumped as the electric car company delivered a record number of vehicles last quarter, making up in part for another wild few days for Tesla and Twitter CEO Elon Musk, on the receiving end of backlash from users after he introduced limits on the number of posts people can read on the social media platform. The billionaire announced the temporary measure to address extreme levels of data scraping on the site. Also on the rise, shares of major banks, Wells Fargo and Goldman Sachs, both gaining after raising dividends.
Got Telegram? You can follow our channel there and discuss show prep with other listeners at telegram.freetalklive.com.
It's Free Talk Live. Phones open if you want to join us here. The number is 603-283-6160. It's Ian, Bonnie, and Mark joining you tonight. You can join us online at freetalklive.com. We have a variety of features there, including our podcast feeds. You can go to feeds.freetalklive.com. You can subscribe to our RSS feed. You can pop that into your favorite podcast client. Or if you're a user of one of those centralized services like iHeartMedia, or I think it's Spotify is the one. There's one of them they're shutting down. I forget what the name of it was, but I removed it from our feeds list. Whichever one they're shutting down is no longer on the Free Talk Live feeds list. It's the other one that started with it. Stitcher. That's the one. Stitcher is being apparently shut down. So if you're on Stitcher and you're listening to Free Talk Live through Stitcher, you probably already know it's going away, so you probably should find something else.
Wait, is Stitcher going away, or is Free Talk Live going away on Stitcher?
No, Stitcher is being shut down. As I understand
Really?
it was in the radio trades recently, Mark. It was I
Sorry,
guess
I didn't read the radio
purchased. It was purchased by Sirius XM at some point in the last some number of years. They snatched it up, and now they've decided that they don't want it anymore, so they're just going to shut it down. So it's done. Yep. Anyway, you can go to feeds.freetalklive.com to find our RSS feed and various different options for listening online via RSS, which is podcast. There. What was that, Bunny?
One thing I want to say about my mom's question from the last call, she called in to ask what we think about the Founding Fathers.
Mm-hmm.
I think that it turned bad, the whole American experiment under the Constitution and the federal government lording over the 50 states, turned bad quicker than people like to admit.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't believe the stuff that I've learned recently about the Whiskey Rebellion.
Like the Alien and Sedition Acts, the Whiskey Rebellion, stuff like that.
They made a tax.
I think Shays' rebellion is probably even more interesting. These were the soldiers of the Revolutionary War, the people who fought and put their lives on the line so that the nobles, who never really, like, if they would have lost, they might have been in big trouble. But, you know, like, the officers weren't in big trouble. It was the enlisted men that were, you know, fighting and dying. And yeah, they had a rebellion in Connecticut, and they, you know, the federal government went and put them down.
Yeah.
So you're saying that the federal government has treated the veterans like crap from the very beginning.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same thing with the Whiskey.
The bonus war.
Mm-hmm.
With the Whiskey Rebellion, it's the same thing. A lot of those people who were growing, wheat that makes whiskey in Western Pennsylvania were also people who fought in the Revolutionary War for things like, you know, no taxation without representation, you know, and the federal government was just saying, well, it's our power to make. And the thing about it, George Washington was one of those big whiskey sellers that was benefiting from this tax. The tax basically made it to where I don't have a super strong. The thing is, I don't understand how alcohol is made, but.
Okay, well, alcohol's made with here's the answer as to why the Whiskey Rebellion happened and why it was put on the Western colonists. So basically, if you're growing wheat and you want to transport it from someplace that's far away, in this case it was Pittsburgh, but you know, it's easier. Yeah, it's easier to turn it into whiskey, which will keep for a long time, than it is to try to take your wheat and, you know, have to protect it from the humidity and
with
all
no
that
refrigeration.
Stuff.
Yeah. Or maybe like a primitive refrigeration. I don't know if they had none.
That gave huge advantages to the people who are in the big cities in Pennsylvania and New York, and just people who are close to that.
They made it illegal to, like you're saying, turn it into whiskey right away. So basically, these people with a whole bunch of wheat were being forced to just sell it as bread and wheat to the people around them and not make the most money that they could possibly make from their own farms. And George Washington directly profited from this, from kicking out a bunch of the competition. And they would send like 500 people into someone's house. Maybe not 500 people into one house, but I don't know. They were sending people in to raid people's houses and pull them out of their houses and stuff like this. This happened under the first U.S. president. This is crazy. And it sucks so bad. I hate him.
Let's go to the phones here. I got Turd Ferguson on the line in Pennsylvania. Go ahead, Turd.
Yeah, what's up? So the FCC is about to finally, after 10 years, open the low-power FM window.
Wow.
Yeah, it's happening on November 1st.
What does that mean? I know what it means when you say they're going to open the low-power FM window, but what does that actually mean?
So they're finally going to allow the public, people like us, people like you and me, to inherently apply for a radio frequency up to 100 watts on the FM band.
So what you're saying is that for the last decade, the federal government's FCC, the Federal Communications Commission, the bureaucrats that regulate the airwaves, have not even allowed people to ask for permission to broadcast.
As far as a low power frequency up to 100 watts, yeah, that's correct. They allow that for a 7-day period, about every 10 years.
Wow! Wow!
Wow!
Yeah, and I've been calling Free Talk Live about this issue for the last really 10 years, since the last window opened, telling people to get ready, because I knew it was going to happen again at least once.
Get your stone tablets out, get your chisel and your hammer, and go ahead and apply on a stone tablet, fly it on the backs of pigeons.
Yeah, well, Turd makes music. Turd likes to make music, so are you going to make your own station or something and start playing your music on it, Turd?
Well, as much as I could do that, and as much as actually I planned for a long time on buying or at least applying for a frequency, the bureaucrats here in Shrewsbury, PA, since I moved here in 2018, have made it quite clear that they just don't like me. They don't like me. They're not going to allow me to use the radio tower here that the Shrewsbury public inherently owns anyway.
Oh. Well, couldn't you just put your own tower up?
Can I put my own tower up? That's funny.
I don't mean like a full-on tower, but like you can get a push-up pole for your house for,
Oh yeah, you can definitely
$200
do that.
bucks.
But but I believe the stipulations in the FCC regulations say you actually have to have a tower. You can't put an antenna
like
up
a
in your
licensed
house.
tower. You have to have like a licensed
LP
tower.
Exactly.
This is what I was going to ask you about, because you'd said, hey, if you wanted a low-power FM permit from the FCC, get ready to apply. What kind of hoops do you have to jump through? I mean, again, the first hoop is up, okay? And that's what you're announcing here tonight is that there has not even been a hoop. Like anybody that wanted to have their own 100-watt low-power FM station simply could not ask for permission to do it at all in the last 10 years. And this LPFM thing's barely been around more than 10 years, if I recall correctly. I think it was in the mid-aughts that this was finally approved after much wrangling by the advocates for the service. But what other things do you have to do besides, what does it take to apply? It isn't just a form, right? Like there's some serious hoop jumping.
So it's done under a point system where they give you points based on what you're doing. And by the way, if you're an American Indian listening to this call, you can automatically get 1 point just for your skin color. But there are other things, and there are other point systems. I mean, if you're a school, you get a point. And I don't remember all of them off the top of my head. I think there's up to 7 or 8 different points that you can earn, and the applicant with the most points is awarded the license. And that's
the license. Hold on a second before your question, Bonnie. The license. Are you saying that there is a limit to the number of licenses available for any given geographic area?
So it depends on the number of frequencies available. Most of them are already taken.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I think that where I stand in Shrewsbury, I believe there's two frequencies total that are available across the entire spectrum.
Wow.
So,
maybe we should try this in Keene.
It's a waste of time.
Why?
Well, first of all, I don't believe you should have to ask permission to broadcast, so I'm not even going to.
You do lots of, you do things that, we follow the FCC guidelines on here.
That's only to protect our radio stations.
Yeah, we shouldn't have to, but we do it to.
Well, we do
be
it
able
so
to
we don't get kicked off the air.
We would be able to reach more people in New Hampshire. Sometimes I feel like, as much as I like the show and everything, I feel like sometimes it doesn't even make sense to talk about some of the things we're talking about to someone sitting in Arizona, for example. A lot of times we're talking about New Hampshire, and I wish that we had more stations in New Hampshire that weren't playing baseball all day.
Right. So, I mean, if you want to do it, Bonnie, you go right ahead, but I'm not interested in asking for permission because then they regulate you. Whenever you ask the government for permission for something, then you become their bitch.
I thought that they already regulate us. They don't let us say things. Apparently, we can say
it's the
B
stations.
word.
So the stations are regulated that we're on. We are not particularly regulated. There's not a license. We don't have a license to broadcast. Our radio stations do. So if we put their license in jeopardy, they will kick us off their station. Anyway, so Turd, what else? You got to get these points, and then maybe you'll get granted a ability to broadcast on an FM station for up to 100 watts.
Yeah, that's correct. And that is provided also that you can provide proof that you have access to a radio tower also.
Mm-hmm.
That's not qualified for a point.
Do you have to do an engineering survey? I know the big stations, when you apply for a full broadcast license, that you have to have an expensive engineering firm come in, and they have to do a contour survey of the area and look at what the potential signal would be and whatever it's going to interfere with, and it's supposedly very expensive. Do you have to do that?
Yeah, I mean, it is very expensive, and I believe I don't know if you have to. I mean, if you know how to run the tests as far as the frequency itself, I don't think so. But locally here, it wouldn't be a problem for me because locally here, there's a woman who's a consultant in, I believe she's in Columbia, Maryland, and she's she's probably 10 to 20 times less expensive than one of those big engineering firms. But yeah, I mean, if you don't know how to run those tests, then I'd imagine you'd have to hire someone like that.
And do you also is it recommended that you hire an attorney to help with the paperwork? Because with the big stations, they usually have broadcast attorneys that know the FCC regulations, they know the ins and the outs of it, so you got to hire them as well.
I think we could actually get a free stater elected in Keene if we had a radio station here.
I don't think so.
Right now, the only radio
Unless they
stations
run as a Democrat.
are
You'd have to run them as a Democrat.
WKBK and whatever else, and they are just Democrats talking on there all day. If you
could run as a
listen to them at all.
Democrat, you'd have a chance, but you certainly couldn't get a Republican.
Let me say that's why the Shrewsbury bureaucrats here didn't want to give me access to the already publicly owned radio tower here because they knew that I was going to use that radio frequency to influence politics here, and that's why specifically they didn't want to.
So you're not even going to try. You're not even going to apply for this thing.
No. I mean, if they're not going to work with me and they're going to be as mean to me as they have been over the past few years, then I'm just not going to do it.
What's the application
I was going to say, does it cost something to apply?
No, it's actually very inexpensive. I think it's a drop in the bucket.
What are we talking about? 5,000, 100?
No, it's not even in the. I think it's in the hundreds.
Oh, okay.
But the businesses here in Shrewsbury would love something like this. They'd love the cheap advertising. I mean,
you can't do advertising. You can only do sponsorships. It's low power FM, so it's non-commercial.
Correct. So they'd love the sponsorships. I mean, it's inherently advertising without a call to action.
And if we had a radio station...
Don't let the FCC hear you say that.
We could have Free Talk Live. We could have a comedy show. We could do Phil Hendry jokes.
All right.
I wouldn't even attempt to be like Phil Hendry. He's too funny.
Mark, you any opinions about this? I mean, you're kind of being quiet out there. I don't know. Did we lose you?
I'm always afraid of getting of the internet dropping out, but you know, I think radio. I think COVID put the final nail in radio's coffin. Is what I think, and it's just, you know, at this point, how many people are listening to the radio that are under the age of like talk radio that are under the age of 50? And that's and another question is when was it that it was reported that podcasting reached parity with broadcast radio as far as listening hours go?
Ooh, I don't know.
I just feel
2 hours. Wasn't that 2 years ago?
I just hear a lot of like, let's not even try coming from you guys, and I don't get it. Like, I think it would be really a good asset to be like, we're on the radio in Keene now. When we talk about Keene things, somebody might call in and be like, oh, you know, this is actually interesting to me, instead of like, where is Keene, New Hampshire? Sorry, I live in Arizona.
I think you can do better with other forms of media. I wouldn't advocate right now buying a blimp, and I wouldn't advocate skywriting. You know, I just don't think that these are the way to reach people.
It is true that no one looks up anymore.
Well, maybe you know what? Those are probably better forms. I'm just going to retract it. AM radio. I'm sorry. Like at
no,
this
it's FM.
point,
FM,
what we need to do is go ask people. Can you turn on your AM radio station? Can you tune in to 1320 right now?
We're talking about FM.
Half of the people don't even know how.
I don't know.
Turd?
I don't agree with that. I mean, there's an AM button in my car.
What do you think, Turd? I mean, I got two different views here. Bonnie's like, yeah, let's do this. Mark's like, yeah, this isn't worthwhile. I mean, are you where are you at on radio these days?
So as much as I'm mad at Bonnie about her opinions on Jennifer Lawrence, I'd actually have to agree with her on this one, because being that Keene, New Hampshire has such a, I mean, they're one of the few places where you've got such kind of such an organized team already, that I think if you have access to a radio tower in Keene, it's probably actually worth it. But that would probably be one of the, I still think it's one of the few cities left in America where it actually would be worthwhile.
What's the rent like on a radio tower? It can't be cheap to put an antenna up there.
So provided you have, so I don't know who owns the towers up there in New Hampshire. I'm sure they have at least a couple ones that are owned by American Tower. If you do, and you can tell them that you're nonprofit, they'll probably do it for just a few $100 a month.
Mm-hmm. I mean, for that kind of money, my viewpoint is, if you've got a freedom movement of libertarians who actually own property, then you could put a radio station, a pirate radio station, on people's property.
But who's going to log into the internet or whatever? How are people going to find a pirate radio station? I never even knew that existed before I met you.
They scan the band.
Nobody does that. They
it.
get in their car, they click the FM button, and they press seek.
Well, once upon a time, we had a pirate station here in New Hampshire that had bandit signs made up, and they put them all around town.
Okay, but they don't anymore.
That's true, because the FCC came in and took the
and besides, I don't want just a bunch
down.
of the smallest little pool of nerds to be the only people that know about Free Talk Live anymore.
No,
I think
bandit
it would be
signs
cool.
would be. I get what you're saying, and it's just not even worth it. It's not even worth the time. It's not worth the effort to deal with the FCC and to have the government come into your house or whatever, into your studio, and regulate the S out of you.
They already come into our studio whenever they want.
Touche.
Every 5 years.
Hey, Turd, thanks for the call tonight. Thanks for the heads up on that. I do appreciate it, and sorry to hear it's not going to work out for you.
I think he should try to.
But he can't even find a location for the antenna.
I tried to get Ian to do FM radio in Keene, New Hampshire 5 years ago, when it probably made more sense. And
what do you mean
he wasn't
do
gonna
FM?
Buy an FM station.
There was an FM station for sale here?
We were going to do,
I don't think
it was
so.
going to be HD2 and what was it? And then
Somebody
put a
was leasing
translator
it?
up.
You're saying someone was leasing that?
HD2 and then do a translator.
Mm-hmm. What were they going to charge for it?
Probably, well, it'd be less than $100,000 to do it in total.
Wow, that's crazy. Yeah, it's hard to
And the
get
thing
excited about it.
The thing about Keene is it's like I never knew what was going on with the, there wasn't like as much local, did you hear they put in a Hobby Lobby and I'm against Hobby Lobby? There wasn't stuff like that in San Antonio because it's just too large.
Mhm.
Keene is basically like a small town. Somebody would call in and be like, here's my opinion on Hobby Lobby. We should boycott. I'm just giving this as an example because it's a thing that's actually happening in Keene right now.
Mhm.
Everybody has an opinion on Hobby Lobby because it came to town and a lot of people are just anti. They don't like them because they're Christians and
Yeah.
it's really dumb. I love Hobby Lobby and I'm going to support them 5 times extra just because of people trying to put them out of business because I love them. They're the best store ever.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry. I brought that up to say because Keene is like a small town, like I think that somebody driving around, turning on the radio might actually be like, hey, I have something to say about this. Oh, whoa, I didn't even know about these people. I heard about Ian Freeman and I thought he sucked, but he is actually making some sense. And
I mean, the problem is, number one, even if it was affordable to do, there really isn't a lot of libertarian talk out there. I mean, I've been programming
why is that a problem?
because you got to fill 24 hours a day. So I've been, programming.
Oh, I see what you're saying for the other parts of the day.
Yeah, I've been programming LRN.FM for more
I
than
think-
a decade, and it's tough.
I think people come out of the woodworks wanting to do their own shows.
Yeah, maybe
Well,
not.
yeah, they might. I don't know the answer, but the other thing is that FM radio is expensive.
Yeah, it is.
Compared to just putting up your own YouTube channel and putting out content that people in Keene can search for and find.
No one's going to search for that, though. That's
the
what I'm
difference,
saying.
They're not going to
No
search
one
for an FM station either.
Yeah, they
You
just
said-
get in
you
their
said.
car and they press search on the FM thing, and if they start hearing somebody saying Keene, New
You were just saying
Hampshire,
you
blah,
never
blah,
do that,
blah.
though.
No, I didn't.
I thought you said you never discover stations like that.
I never said that. I said people get in their car, press the FM button, press seek.
Oh yeah,
And I
yeah.
do
I
it-
thought. I'm sorry. Totally misunderstood you before because I thought you were saying people didn't do that. That's why I was
that's what I
telling
thought
you
you were
that some
saying,
people
too.
put up bandit signs to let people know
Well, yeah,
about
there's
their
nothing
stations.
wrong with that too. But no, I said people do that. Like
I
whenever
agree.
I
People
don't
do
feel
that
like
because you were asking
whenever
how
I
do
wanna
people
listen to
find a
music-
pirate radio
Oh,
station?
a pirate radio station? I thought that they're not on the regular FM button.
No, Bunny. No, a pirate radio station is just a station that doesn't ask for permission.
Okay.
They're on FM. In fact, we've had
Well, won't you eventually get
4
taken
or
down if
5,
you're
yes.
like, I'm
In
Ian
fact,
Freeman?
we've had 4 or 5 pirate stations here in Keene. It's been probably most of a decade since they were here, but we've actually had multiple activists in the Keene area hosting pirate radio stations, and they do get listeners. In fact, Mark was in the YMCA working out once when Judge Burke, who was the the key judge in Keene, like the big bad Judge Burke, came up to you and complimented the pirate radio station that he was a listener of. Isn't that right, Mark?
I don't remember the story now, but
I
I'll
remember
bet
you
do.
telling that. Yeah, I remember that's a really memorable story because
crazy.
people, like you said, Bonnie, Keene's a small market and there's only one talk radio station here, and so if you put another one on, people are going to listen to it.
And maybe
So-
that Hobby Lobby example I brought up sounds really boring to a lot of people, but
That's what people in
wouldn't
small towns
just-
think is interesting.
it
you know?
wouldn't just be things like that. Like things happening in New Hampshire
Yeah.
are basically interesting to all the people in New Hampshire because it's small enough. I mean, it's smaller than San Antonio.
It would be nice if you could actually have a radio station that wouldn't get rated by the federal government for operating, and you could take it seriously. But again, putting
Why
content
even
on there
put-
would be a challenge
Any effort into a pirate radio station when you know it's going to get taken down.
because people listen.
And for how long? It's
It
going to
could
get
be
taken
months. The longest run was like 8 months
down. Okay, but
before they came in, and so you get a lot of people listening to that.
for only 8 months and then it's gone.
That's
It's
a
kind of
long
sad. I'd be
time.
sad if I liked listening to
And then
something
you
and then
put it
got
up
taken down
again.
because Ian doesn't want to have the government tell him what to do,
And
even
then
though
you
they're going
put
to
it
tell
up
you what to do
again.
anyway by taking it away.
Yeah, but then you put it up again, and it lasts for like 4 months, and then it lasted for like 3 months.
Well, what if they
and
bring
then-
charges against you for that?
Well, if it's
How
if
much would it
moves
be
around,
worth, Bonnie?
They can't.
How much is it worth?
I don't
To do the
know. My whole thing is just why not even try? It's not like it's like
Well,
'Cause
that's
it
the
takes
question.
time and
though.
money.
Is this it takes time and money, right? To put up a low power FM.
Just to
It doesn't
apply,
have-
it takes time and money.
Well, I think that you're going to have to apply to get it, and low power FMs are likely to be granted, especially if you have a church or something like that. You're going to be more likely to get it. Now, I think that, but you're going to spend money putting this on the air. And let's not forget, this is really important. The Shire Free Church was refused to even buy a piece of property from this one seller. This one seller is like, I'm not selling to you people. So what's it going to be like? There's only a limited number of towers in Keene.
I bet there's not people jumping all over to get them, though.
I don't know, Bonnie. I suspect there's going to be multiple people applying for this. And then you got to beat organizations that have been in the area for decades.
In there? The other thing is there's too many libertarian podcasts on the internet. I follow like 1,000 people that are also
Unfortunately, we are out of
libertarian
time.
podcasters.
Back tomorrow online in the meantime, freetalklive.com. Free Talk Live is brought to you by Dash Digital Cash. Dash is the cryptocurrency designed to be used for spending. In 2022, Dash launched a killer app that allows you to spend Dash at over 155,000 locations across the United States, including major retailers, and you get a discount for paying with Dash. Finally, a reason to spend your crypto. It's called Dash Direct. Get it on your Apple or Android app store. The stores on Dash Direct each offer their own discount level, but some are as high as 8 to 9% off.